Listen to the interview wherever you get your BBC podcast. Until the next time, bye for now.
From the BBC, that was the interview. I'm Saroja Coelho. CBC News is next.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and we're live downtown in our CBC studios. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube this morning. We are looking for a rainy day in Winnipeg. The rain will start around noon today, and today's high is going to be 13 degrees. Also, in some parts of Manitoba, west central Manitoba, Dauphin, Russell, St. Rose, up through the Duck Mountain Provincial Park and Provincial Forest, you're expecting snow, so 10 to 20 centimeters of snow, at times heavy, coming through eastern Saskatchewan and right through Westman. So that sets up our Tuesday morning. Thanks for joining us after the long weekend, if you had one. We're on air with the morning show till 8:37. Corey Funk is back today once again, directing the show and covering the commute. Abby Adeyemi's our senior technician, and we'll be covering weather on air. And Brad Lillies is back this morning, our YouTube producer and switcher. So good morning to all you guys. Heather Wells is here as well. 3 minutes to 6. She has our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, we are just learning the timing of the funeral for Pope Francis, who passed away yesterday. His funeral will be held on Saturday. The U.S. President Donald Trump will be among world leaders who will be attending. Some Manitobans are continuing to reflect on the life of Pope Francis. A residential school survivor says the Pope did the right thing when others would not. Phil Fontaine spent decades pushing for the Catholic Church to apologize for its role in Canada's residential school system. Francis delivered a landmark apology in 2022 when he visited Canada. So we'll hear more about that. Also, plenty of white noise last night in Winnipeg. Thousands at the sold-out Whiteout Street Party outside Canada Life Centre. Inside, the Jets beat the Blues to take a 2-0 lead in that playoff series. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
Kyle Connor, more pretty goals, please.
Amazing. Isn't he great?
Yeah, he's so great. Him and Shifley have got it locked in, so let's hope that continues. That was fun to watch. So hopefully we'll have early games like that too. Sorry.
Yeah, our next game's going to be a little later.
I know, because they're going to St. Louis. All right, thanks, Heath.
You're welcome.
It's a good thing the weather cooperated for last night if you were one of the thousands of people downtown, of course. Well, on the Pope, we're going to talk more today about which direction the church will go. Will the church become more liberal or conservative? That depends on who the next Pope is going to be. We have one of the Archbishop on this morning, the Archbishop of Winnipeg, so stay tuned. Right now, though, it is time for your CBC National News.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Blink-182 are one of the biggest rock or punk bands of the last few decades. But behind the scenes, it's been a lot. Breakups, cancer diagnoses, plane crashes. Mark Hoppus from Blink-182 will be here to tell you about his new memoir and why they've kept going. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Cardinals from around the world are arriving at the Vatican, and reporters are tracking them, looking for information. The coming days and weeks will be a flurry of activity. The Catholic Church is preparing to lay its former leader to rest. Then it begins an ancient process of convening a conclave to select the next pope. For more, I'm joined by Megan Williams in the Vatican. Megan, there are new details about next steps in the Pope's funeral. What have we learned?
Well, we've learned when the funeral is going to be, which is Saturday morning at 10 o'clock Rome time. It will be presided over Cardinal Giambattista Re. Right now, the cardinals are meeting to discuss other details, probably figure out when the conclave is going to be. That hasn't been announced. But starting the day of the funeral on Saturday, that is a period of 9 days of mourning. So the conclave won't be before then. On Wednesday, the Vatican has said they will bring the Pope's body in the coffin. They've released pictures of that now to St. Peter's Basilica. Right now, the Pope's body is in his Santa Marta guest house. So on Wednesday, people will start lining up to be able to view the Pope in his coffin inside St. Peter's Basilica.
You are at the Vatican again today. What's the mood like there?
There's lots and lots of people streaming down the main avenue towards the St. Peter's Square, St. Peter's Basilica. It's very crowded here. Lots of sadness, of course. Many, many pilgrims have come from all over the world. This is the Holy Jubilee year for the Catholic Church, which happens every 25 years. So there were already a lot of people coming in, and I think a lot of disappointed people who were hoping to capture a glimpse of the Pope. But still, I think there's anticipation to the funeral. Certainly here at the Vatican, there's a lot of buzz. There's a lot to deal with in the coming days.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, Marcia.
Megan Williams reporting from the Vatican. Catholic churches around the world are holding Mass to remember Pope Francis. Hundreds of people gathered in Manila for Requiem Mass. The Philippines is considered one of the world's largest Catholic strongholds. More than 80 million Catholics live there. These worshipers reflect on their memories of Pope Francis.
I cried a lot because I last saw him last Palm Sunday in St. Peter's Square. So I was fortunate enough to see him to bless us.
The holiness of Pope Francis exudes from his personality.
One of the people said to be in line to succeed Pope Francis is Filipino Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. The 67-year-old has often been referred to as the Asian Francis. Pope Francis's legacy is a complex one for many, including members of Indigenous communities. On a visit to Canada nearly 3 years ago, the Pope apologized for the harms done in residential schools. The Pope called it genocide. As Sam Sampson tells us, many hope his successor will continue his work of reconciliation.
I think he appreciates to hear what the stories are of the people of this land.
Chief Tony Alexis of Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation stands on the edge of Lac St. Anne, exactly where Pope Francis blessed the water during his 2022 visit, part of a historic change between the Catholic Church and Indigenous communities.
That I am deeply sorry.
While in Alberta, Pope Francis made the Church's first apology on Canadian soil for the abuse Indigenous people suffered in Catholic-run residential schools.
He didn't come here to stand above us. He came to stand with us.
Later, Pope Francis declared what happened in residential schools was a genocide, and he rejected the doctrine of discovery, a religious document that gives Christian explorers claim to land.
No apology will be able to rectify the harms that were felt by residential school survivors.
Anishinaabe author and University of Manitoba professor Nigon Sinclair says the Catholic Church needs to build on this momentum and do more, like release residential school records.
My hope is that the Catholic Church picks up the work of the progressive Pope and doesn't forget that what brought you to this point of finally Indigenous peoples are beginning to rebuild trust with you.
A call to action for whoever takes Pope Francis's place. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Lac St. Anne, Alberta.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is promising to release his party's fully costed platform today. And in the final days of the Canadian election campaign, he's making a push to win over seniors. They are a powerful voting bloc, one that has traditionally supported the Conservative Party. But as Kate McKenna reports, public opinion polls show many are looking to the Liberals.
I haven't decided yet. That might surprise you, but I have not decided.
Gail Brown says her vote is still up for grabs. The Toronto senior says she's been paying close attention to the campaign. Yesterday, she heard Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre speak to the Canadian Association of Retired Persons.
Well, he's made quite a few mistakes, and one of them is constantly shooting down the other party and saying the same things over and over again. He should have instead pushed the positive side of his campaign.
In the final days of the race, Poilievre is making his pitch to seniors. He released a new ad targeting baby boomers, and yesterday in Toronto, he spoke to CARP members in a town hall.
Conservatives will preserve the age of retirement for CPP, OAS, and GIS at age 65, period.
Polls show his rival, Liberal leader Mark Carney, is leading in senior support. Rudy Boudinol is the president of CARP.
Seniors are very fearful right now. They're really worried about their retirement. They're worried about their income. I guess they're going to things that feel comfortable or safer.
Seniors represent a powerful voting bloc, in part because they're a demographic that reliably shows up to vote. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Mississauga, Ontario.
Liberal leader Mark Carney had some star power on stage with him last night at his rally in Fredericton.
Well, I'm getting old, but I'm not old yet. I'm already worried.
That is musician David Miles, now running as the Liberal candidate in Fredericton Ormocto. And he got the crowd warmed up before Carney delivered his speech, which featured a new take on an old line.
The core of our plan is to build. Baby, build. We will be done.
Carney is pitching himself as a leader who can stand up to U.S. President Donald Trump. And today, he'll do that in Quebec. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is starting his day in the Vancouver area with similar talking points.
This is the most consequential election in a generation because Trump is attacking Canadian jobs. He's coming for our land, our water, our health care. He's trying to hike up drug prices, all for the benefit of billionaires.
He will also hold a rally in Edmonton tonight. Workers who were laid off by a former Better Business Bureau are now suing. The Ottawa-based organization was part of an international network, but last year it was kicked out and its employees were let go without severance. The CBC's Arthur White-Crummey has their story.
Cassandra Fowler was laid off last year.
I'm still kind of coming back from that financially because it's a huge hit for me.
She should have received severance and back vacation pay. She figures it was worth about $10,000.
I could have really dug myself out of a financial hole that put me in had I received it.
But she says she never got a penny because of a rift between a Canadian Better Business Bureau and its headquarters south of the border. The Better Business Bureau of Canada's Northern Capital Regions and Quebec operated in 3 provinces, Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta. Last year, the U.S.-based International Association of BBBs expelled it, saying the chapter wasn't meeting financial management standards. That meant it couldn't call itself a Better Business Bureau. It renamed itself Nearby and tried to keep going. Celia Lyons was assistant sales manager. She says member businesses saw no reason to stay on.
People were yelling at us on the phone and hanging up on us. It was crazy.
It lasted 3 months. Then Lyons, too, was out of a job without the severance and vacation pay her contract entitled her to.
We're all desperately trying to survive. I know a lot of people haven't found jobs yet, and people that have found jobs are working for like minimum wage, just trying to pay their bills.
Fowler and Lyons haven't pursued legal action, but 2 other employees have. In a lawsuit, they say they're owed more than $250,000. In a statement, the company says the board of directors has always been committed to sound governance, including strong financial oversight. The allegations haven't been proven in court. Arthur White-Crummey, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on that app and on YouTube. Thanks for joining us on CBC. In the city right now, we're sitting at 7 degrees, still dusting off the good cheer from last night's Jets win and all the thousands of people downtown in Winnipeg. Well, this hour on the program, we're going to continue talking about the death of the Pope. We'll hear from Anishna Abe, author, who says Pope Francis was the only one who made an apology for the Catholic Church's involvement in residential schools. He does hope to see the next Pope continue the reconciliation work, and so we'll hear that coming up in the first half hour of the show. In addition, healthcare is as an issue in the federal election campaign. We're going to talk to some of the experts what the parties are offering Canadians when it comes to promises and policy around healthcare. And then later, record number of voters turning out for the advance polls over the holiday weekend. We'll get some analysis of that on Ottawa Report. So that's all still ahead this hour, and then more, of course, through the show. Right now, though, let's touch base with Heather Welsh. She's here with your headlines on this Tuesday morning post-long weekend. Hi to you.
Good morning. Hi. Yeah. A member of Winnipeg's Jewish community says hate has no place regardless of politics. Campaign signs for incumbent Conservative MP Marty Morantz were vandalized in his riding over the long weekend. Avram Sharak says that is not the way to voice political disagreement, so we'll hear more from him. And a U.S.-based organization is moving its operations to Manitoba as the uncertainty of U.S. tariffs continues. Global Vision 2020 gives eyeglasses to people in developing countries, but their lenses and frames come from China, and the U.S. has slapped a 145% tariff on Chinese imports. So we'll hear more on that as well in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the forecast. It is, it's wet and snowy depending on where you're at. Abby's in to run down some of the warnings we've got out there.
Yeah, good morning from southern Manitoba, tracking it far north. It's going to be a mixed bag today. Rain and snow in the forecast from the west out into the central regions. We're going to see cloudy skies and, of course, some showers also. We do have that snowfall warning in effect for parts of western Manitoba, mostly tracking it into the Dauphin, Russell, and surrounding regions. Snow is expected to begin this morning. We're going to look at periods of heavy snow continuing into tonight. That will taper off tomorrow morning. We're looking at a total of about 10 to 20 centimeters once this system passes through in that region, with the heaviest likely to fall in places where we have the higher terrain, and travels will definitely be affected. Visibility could also be impacted. So drivers, you need to keep an eye out for other road users. Now let's shift to the city of Winnipeg, where we have our temperatures currently sitting at 7 degrees at this time. We're starting the day under mostly cloudy conditions. Now by noon, expect rain to begin moving in, with breezy east winds adding a cool touch to the day. The high will be around 13 degrees today. It will feel damp with the rain starting this afternoon, and then as we head into tonight, the rain continues. We'll see about 5 to 10 millimeters expected. So it might be a colder night with temperatures dropping to around 3 degrees. Across the region, the Red River, the Pembina Valley region will also see rain move in this afternoon period. That winds coming from the east. Similar conditions we will see in Brandon, a mix of wet, snow, and rain in the forecast for that part of the province. But right now, Winnipeg, 7 degrees under cloudy skies. Rain expected around your noon period.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's get into the morning commute. Corey Funk's popped in. Hi.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, so far I haven't heard of any major issues on the highways from any of the weather that Abby just talked about or anything like that. But if you're out there, you're walking, you're biking, you're driving, you see something going on, give me a call on that CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, reaction continues all over the world to the death of Pope Francis on Easter Monday. He served as leader of the Catholic Church for the past 12 years. Some Catholics and non-believers both argue that he is one of the most progressive popes in the Catholic Church's history. CBC's Rosanna Hempel spoke with Anishinaabe author Negon Sinclair here in Winnipeg about what legacy Pope Francis is leaving behind.
How do you and how does the Indigenous community think about the Pope's legacy?
This is by far, and perhaps only, the most progressive pope in history. You're probably not going to get a better one than the one that we've just had. This is an inclusive pope. This is a pope that tried to move this church, which is so difficult to move, with such hardcore conservative elements. And he responded to Indigenous peoples in ways in which popes had never done before. Call to Action 58, in particular, coming to Canada, offering an apology, doing things like rescinding the doctrine of discovery, and then recognizing genocide. When he was in Quebec City, with offering the Vespers to other Canadian Catholics, he said that when Indigenous peoples are in their own culture, traditions, and customs, they are already showing the presence of God, which proves that the Church's project for the past 150 plus years has been incorrect.
So do you think you'll look back at it positively?
Absolutely. I'm writing about this in my column today. I would say that Pope Francis's contributions to reconciliation will never be forgotten. He is the first pope to take a footstep in that direction. He needed to come to this country and respond to Indigenous leadership. I think the church is not ready for reconciliation in lots of different ways, but Pope Francis tried to move the church in that direction.
So do you credit that, the efforts towards reconciliation to him directly? Or?
No. The reason that Pope Francis came was because of Indigenous leaders that called upon, extended a gift to the Pope to come to this country. And it was also Canadian Catholics. It was everyday Catholics who lived with, worked with, were married to Indigenous peoples, many Indigenous Catholics. They deserve the credit for the Pope coming to this country and reconciliation starting.
I meant more so like him as a part of the Catholic Church and not the Catholic Church as a whole.
I would say that if there's anything Pope Francis really deserves is that he listened well. He listened to Canadian Catholics, he listened to Indigenous Catholics, he listened to Indigenous leaders that called upon him to come to Canada and to respond to this important project of reconciliation taking place in this country.
How do you feel about that work continuing now that he's gone?
I have a deep, deep fear that the Catholic Church is going to respond with a very conservative, very traditionalist. And if there's anything that America has taught us is that when you get a very progressive president, you get a Donald Trump. Someone who's trying to be regressive, someone who's trying to turn back the clock, someone who's trying to instill many of those policies that are extremely violent. And my fear is that the next Pope may be that kind of leader. My sources, however, in the Vatican and in the Canadian Council of Bishops have told me that there is a lot of progressive elements that have been instigated, started, installed because of Pope Francis.
What other ongoing work were you looking for from the Catholic Church?
The Church has to return stolen land. The Church has to fulfill their promises, their legal requirements under the settlement agreement, which they have still not yet to do. And they have a massive problem in terms of building relationships of honesty, of trust, of integrity with Indigenous peoples. And one of the biggest projects, of course, is finding where those lost children are. They could be in potentially unmarked graves or anomalies that look like unmarked graves at residential school sites. They may also be elsewhere. They may also be in historical records, offering those historical records to places like researchers or the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation or media. I have lots to say about the problems in the whole process, but I think it's for Catholics to...
What whole process do you mean?
Like picking and what goes into the next picking and what goes into the next process and those kinds of things. I think there's lots of concerns that what are the factors that go into picking a pope, and do they consider the really critical progressive elements that Pope Francis did regionally? And I'm not just talking about Canada now, I'm also talking about Europe, I'm also talking about South America, I'm talking about Africa. The fact that he made extremely progressive moves, for example, towards the LGBTQ community. My hope is that all of those are considered in the choice of the next pope.
That's Nigon Sinclair in conversation with CBC's Rosanna Hempel here in Winnipeg. And Nigon, of course, an Anishinaabe author and University of Manitoba professor in Indigenous knowledge, reflecting on the death of Pope Francis and also on the future of the Catholic Church. Now, later in the program, we have the Archbishop of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Winnipeg, who will be our guest after 8 o'clock on the show. And we will ask him about some of the concerns about what kind of a leader will be chosen next, and also what his hopes are for who that person might be. So stay tuned. That's still ahead right here on CBC.
The United States has been ripped off.
The stories that matter.
Canada will be responding
as they happen.
We must put Canada first.
At home and around the world.
We don't need the products that they have.
And what they mean to you. For news you can trust.
We're coming to you live.
Stay with CBC News.
Time right now is 6:20. It's 7 degrees. It's mostly cloudy in Winnipeg, and in Brandon it's cloudy. It's 2 degrees. Thompson's mainly clear right now and -9. We are expecting rain in Winnipeg, about 5 to 10 millimeters tonight, and the rain should begin in Winnipeg, however, today. So it's going to start around noon. So this morning, even though it's not going to be raining on you likely, bring your jacket and just prepare for later. Well, the following airtime is made available for messages provided by registered political parties as required by the Canada Elections Act.
A lot of us really don't want Pierre Poilievre to win this election. But the more I hear about Mark Carney, the more I worry. He's planning tax cuts for the rich and health care cuts for the rest of us. Here's the thing. We know we can count on the NDP. They've always fought for us, and we need them in Ottawa more than ever. Canada works best when the NDP's there. We just got to vote for them. Authorized by the registered agent for the new Democratic Party of Canada.
The proceeding was a paid political ad.
They soar among the trees and enrich our Earth. And this Earth Day at Fort White Alive, learn about the birds with CBC. Join us at Fort White Alive's Earth Day celebration, April 27th, for a virtual bird tour. Follow the posted QR codes to learn some amazing bird facts. Fly with Fort White Alive and CBC this Earth Day. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
So listening to the sounds of those birds, we thought we'd do something fun on this Earth Day, because it's actually today Earth Day, right? We'll see if this takes off or not. It's kind of a bird pun. Can you do an animal sound? That's what we're looking for. It's Earth Day. What animal can you impersonate? I'll do mine later. Yes, I do have one in my back pocket. 788-3205. 788-3205. I don't think anyone's going to call, but we'll see. Well, next on the show, let's return to politics. You might be wondering what the federal parties are saying about healthcare across the country during this campaign. Doctor shortages, nurses, burnouts, long waits in emergency rooms and wards, and whether dental care and pharmacare programs will continue to be funded are all questions being asked and issues being raised on the campaign trail. When we were out at different ridings, when I was out specifically in different ridings in Winnipeg, I can tell you that I was in Transcona and EK Elmwood. We were out west in Charleswood, Headingley, and then we were out south in neighborhoods like Fort Richmond and around deeper into St. Norbert. Everyone brought up healthcare. At least when we were talking in the conversations, there was always somebody that was bringing up healthcare. So how are the major parties responding to the concerns about healthcare? Stephen Staples is our next guest with the Canadian Health Coalition, which is an advocacy group. Good morning.
Hi, Marcy.
So some people will right away say healthcare is provincial, period. What is your perspective on this and how it should figure into the federal election?
Well, they're not wrong that by and large, most of our healthcare system is provided by provincial and territorial governments. But on the other hand, actually, healthcare, every level of government plays a role. Even municipalities, if you think about it, play a role in delivering healthcare to Canadians. And our program, our national program of Medicare that we have now, it started in a province next door in Saskatchewan back in the 60s, but it was the federal government through the Canada Health Act later in the 80s that began to stitch together a national Medicare program. So the federal government absolutely plays an important role. And, and it's big money. They put $50 billion a year in transfers to the provinces from the federal government, not to mention all the other programs that they've got on top of that. So that's a big chunk of money. And I think we deserve to know what the new prime minister, whoever that may be, plans to do with that $50 billion that's going to provinces.
So run us through what the Liberals and the Conservatives and the NDP have said about their plans for healthcare.
Little, in a word. I'm delighted to hear your report that people are talking about healthcare. That goes with our polling that we hear. It's always the top third, but in the first part of the election, we heard very little mention of healthcare. It was mostly about the economy, mostly dealing with Trump. The issue was bubbling under. For the Liberals and the Conservatives, they would only talk about healthcare if pressed from journalists, but the NDP was out there very clearly on healthcare. So if we could run through the platforms, the Conservatives have not issued their platform yet. That's going to come out today. But there have been a few comments on healthcare, and it's unclear really whether they would continue with pharmacare, for instance, or dental care. They basically said, if you've got it now, you can keep it, but are they going to continue? Because the program hasn't been finished yet. So that's unclear. The Liberals had quite a bit in their platform that was released over the weekend. One of the main things was $4 billion for healthcare infrastructure, improving hospitals, looking at other community centers and things like that. Of course, top of mind for most of the platforms is dealing with the problem with access to doctors. How do we get more doctors? How do we get more nurses? That's part of the Liberal plan as well, too, which is to create more spaces for training, bringing more people in from other countries, and making it more easy for licensure and to set up practices. So that's part of the Liberal plan. Mental health is also an issue that kind of runs through both the Liberals and the NDP, and new programs dealing with mental health and the opioid crisis. And just flipping quickly to the NDP, this is their strong suit. That's why Jagmeet Singh, their leader, kept kind of really pushing the healthcare issue forward in the debates. And that has been a role even in government for the NDP to push things like pharmacare and dental care program. So what they've got in the window is access to a family doctor by 2030. That's a big promise for them, and a series of steps, including improving access to doctors, training in rural areas, but expanding pharmacare. So they want to continue and add new classes of drugs. They put $29 billion over 4 years in their platform for that. And they're concerned about the privatization of healthcare, and that no other party has really talked about that. So you see some similarities, but also some distinct differences from amongst the parties on healthcare.
Given that you're coming into the conversation with a distinct point of view, you're with an advocacy group. I want to ask you what your thoughts are on the transfer payments that you raised, because of course that is the end point for federal provincial relationship over healthcare, because we get the money from the feds. But some of the parties are saying that provinces need to be extremely accountable about where they spend that money. Prove to us you spent it on healthcare and show us the breakdown of where. And other parties are saying the money will keep flowing. The provinces will make their own decisions. Do you have a position on that?
We sure do. We're on the accountability side of the ledger on that one. That when we think this money, the federal money, is transferred to provinces, there should be conditions put on it. At a very minimum, enforcing the Canada Health Act and the principles that of universality, portability, accessibility, comprehensiveness, all of those, public administration, the 5 principles of it. And we need real champions of that in Ottawa, and being prepared to make sure that the provinces live up to that and actually spend that money on healthcare. Now, to some parties like the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois, they may see that as an intrusion into the provincial areas of responsibility. You got it. But we see, no, we got to put some accountability on that, make sure that those dollars are spent well. And really the federal government has got to play a leadership role in strengthening and expanding our public healthcare system. So that's what we look for.
What about the discussion? I have heard nothing of this in the campaign trail myself, and so I'll ask you, because you're leaning into trying to listen to our healthcare issue specifically. Maybe I've missed it. But the discussion about healthcare for First Nations and Indigenous people across this country. I know that during COVID in Manitoba, a lot of our healthcare workers were held up because there was sort of a really progressive structure and system led by Indigenous people for Indigenous people to deliver healthcare. Is that discussion coming up anywhere in the campaign?
You got to read the details in order to get that, but it is there. I mean, the federal government does provide healthcare services to a lot of First Nations communities through its own special program. So that is something that is important. But we know there's this thing called the social determinants of health. So if you don't have access to resources, if you're a marginalized community, generally your health is impacted by that and not in a positive way. So the NDP has put something like that in their platform of looking at Indigenous healthcare, strengthening Indigenous healthcare, being more receptive, including Indigenous communities in the design of their own and delivery of their healthcare. That's why they want to do training programs in the north and in rural areas. And also they have some aspects of dealing with systemic racism in the healthcare system as well overall, so that we don't have repeats of Joyce Echequan that we saw in Quebec a few years ago, who lost her life arguably because of kind of racist behavior that was embedded in the system. So it is there. It's subtle, but it is there, at least with the NDP at this point.
Stephen Staples, thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure.
That is Stephen Staples, National Director of Policy and Advocacy with the Canadian Health Coalition. And he set us up because in the next hour, our partisan panel is all about the issues that have not been coming up on the campaign trail. Stay with us. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's 7 degrees. It is going to be a wet Earth Day today across Manitoba. In Winnipeg, expect rain beginning around noon, 5 to 10 millimeters through the day and into tonight, a high of 13. In western Manitoba, areas around Dauphin, you have a snowfall warning, 10 to 20 centimeters possible. Winnipeg police say they are investigating graffiti in Tuxedo. Over the weekend, campaign signs of a local Jewish candidate in the federal election were defaced with hateful messages. Some of the signs of incumbent Winnipeg West MP Marty Morantz were defaced, some making him look like Adolf Hitler. Members of the city's Jewish community, Avram Sharak, says one of the defaced signs was near the Asper Jewish Community campus.
They very much targeted a spot where they knew the maximum number of Jewish people would go by, which is disturbing, quite frankly. It's just disturbing because what's tomorrow going to bring? Are they going to do it again?
Winnipeg West Liberal candidate Doug Ailofson issuing a statement supporting Marty Morantz. Ailofson says anti-Semitism has no place in Canada regardless of political disagreements. The funeral for Pope Francis, we are learning, will be held on Saturday at 3 o'clock in the morning Central Time, 10 o'clock in the morning in Vatican City. The leader of the Catholic Church died yesterday at the age of 88 from a stroke and heart failure. Now, in Manitoba, a residential school survivor says Pope Francis did the right thing when most others would not. Phil Fontaine spent decades pushing the Catholic Church to apologize for its role in Canada's residential school system. Francis delivered a landmark apology in 2022 when he visited Canada. Fontaine, the former chief of the Assembly of First Nations, met with the Pope when he traveled to Vatican City.
Pope Francis' relationship with Indigenous peoples is profound because he is the first pope to ever apologize for the Church's wrongdoing with our peoples. And more importantly, he asked for forgiveness.
Now, some Winnipeggers worry about who the Catholic Church will choose to replace Pope Francis. During his time as pontiff, Francis apologized to Indigenous people and welcomed the LGBTQ plus community. University of Manitoba Indigenous Studies professor Negon Sinclair says Pope Francis was a progressive leader whose work won't be forgotten.
I have a deep, deep fear that the Catholic Church is going to respond with a very conservative, very traditionalist, someone who's trying to be regressive, someone who's trying to turn back the clock.
Sinclair believes the situation draws comparisons to U.S. politics, where two progressive presidents have been followed by a regressive president who is trying to turn back the clock. Well, a U.S.-based organization is moving its operations to Manitoba as the uncertainty of U.S. tariffs continues. Global Vision 2020 gives eyeglasses to people in developing countries. Their lenses and frames come from China. The U.S. has slapped a 145% tariff on Chinese imports, meaning costs for those who need affordable eyewear would almost double. Rick Cohen is part of the U.S. National Council for Nonprofits. He says much like Global Vision 2020, other organizations in the country are negatively impacted by these tariffs.
Budgets are already overstretched. They're being faced by a number of funding cuts as well as the potential for increases in costs for everything that they need to deliver services in communities.
Global Vision 2020 will move production to Manitoba this summer. Experts say bail reform isn't the way to fix a revolving door of reoffenders in the justice system. Adelina Iftene is an associate professor of law at Dalhousie University. She says most offenders are eventually released from custody, and if they don't get the support they need, there's a good chance they will reoffend. She says that's why improving those supports is a better way to reduce crime.
Nothing suggests that more remand is keeping communities safer. On the contrary, there is a lot of work showing the lack of opportunities for rehabilitation, which include keeping people in prison, is actually what's making us a lot less safe.
Calls for bail reform have grown in Manitoba in recent months. Municipal leaders recently gathered to raise their concerns about the issue ahead of the upcoming federal election. Well, downtown Winnipeg got loud last night. Thousands celebrating a Winnipeg Jets win at the Whiteout Street Party. Alphonse Gabriel says the Jets were just unreal.
They dominated the Blues. They might have had the first period, but they couldn't compete.
And to the game itself, here's the goal that won it Kyle Kyle Connor in the third period on Sportsnet as the Jets beat the Blues 2-1 and take a 2-0 lead in the series. Kyle Connor says winning that second playoff game was on all the players' minds.
It's a second win, but we're not resting here. We got a long ways to go, and take what we can, look at the video, make adjustments if need be, and on to the next one.
And the next one is in St. Louis on Thursday, and it is a late start. Puck drop is 8:30. You can find more news updated throughout the day and all the highlights of the last night's game. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. We've erased a couple of disappointments in playoffs of Game 2s, Heather, so that's good.
Historically, yes.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just want to give you a small programming note here just before we get into weather and traffic on your Tuesday morning here. You will be hearing ads on the air during the campaign. During federal elections, the Canada Elections Act obliges CBC Radio to make airtime available for purchase by all registered political parties. Now, not all parties exercise their right to buy time, so you, as a result, might hear advertising on behalf of only one party, although the time is equally made available to all of the parties. So just to mention, as we're inside a week to Election Day here, of something you're going to be hearing on the airwaves, or maybe you already have heard. It is 23 minutes to 7 o'clock. It's time for our regional forecast, and then we're going to have a little bit of fun with an Earth Day question I asked. But first, let's get through the details of the weather, Abby.
We're looking at a mixed bag today. Rain and snow in the west and the central region. Cloudy skies and showers in the southern region into the Interlake region. Then we'll see some snowfall warning impacting western Manitoba into the Parkland region. This will be affecting Dauphin and surrounding areas. Snow times will be heavy, and this will continue through the day. We're looking at 10 to 20 centimeters once the system moves through that region. Roads may become sleek and visibility could drop fast. So drivers advised to slow down and drive with caution once you notice this. Looking at conditions in the Red River Valley region, today's forecast for Winnipeg right now, 7 degrees, mostly cloudy outside. The rain is expected to start around the noon period. We're looking at about 5 to 10 millimeters. That's what's expected because this rain will be with us for most of the day. Some winds would get breezy from the east. We'll see highs around 13 degrees tonight and today. And then tonight, the showers will continue dropping temperatures to around 3 degrees. Tomorrow brings a mix of sun and clouds. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region. From Morden, Winkler, Alton, all the way down to Morris. 4 degrees at this time. Also expecting 5 to 10 millimeters of rain in that part of the province. Brandon, good morning. You are 3 degrees. Cloudy skies. Rain expected. Also, wet snow in the mix this morning. 5 to 15 millimeters of rain expected for that part of the province. Dauphin is at 0 at this time. We're seeing snow already falling steady in that part. And you should be seeing about 10 centimeters as mentioned. Gimli is at 4 on the cloudy conditions. The Interlake region also expecting rain this afternoon. High around 13. The powerful influence surrounding areas, we're looking at temperatures around -5 at this time. A mix of sun and clouds in the forecast. Highs around 7 degrees. Thompson is at -10 at this time. Clear starts already. The sun about to make its appearance. It's going to be mostly sunny today. Nice. You see highs around 4. And then in Churchill, -14. That's the cold parts this morning. -14. It's misty in that part of the province. It's going to also stay mostly sunny, but you won't be leaving that freezing point. You're still going to be warming up to about -6 today. So it's more like cloudy conditions, rain and snow in the forecast across board today.
We got everything.
We got it.
All right, stick around. I have a question for you. But Corey, anything from the commute?
Very quiet commute overall. Haven't heard of any major issues, but if you do see something, 204-788-3093.
So the question is the silly one that I posed to listeners earlier. It's Earth Day, and we're wondering if you can make a sound of your favorite animal. This is so dumb. But apparently our team can make some impressions of animals. So, Funk, you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. So
okay, what do you got? What do you got for us?
Okay, this is my favorite sound I love when I'm camping to wake up to. I don't know what animal actually belongs to, but here it is. So
I know that bird.
So I don't know. It's probably, I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be a ornithologist bird listener. Yeah.
I answered you back.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. So
You're
having a bird
yeah, that was very good for you.
Thank you. And I don't know what it is, but I'm sure someone's going to call the commuter line and it's going to be like, that's a blue-footed warbler or something like that.
I hope they do. I don't have a wild animal. I've just got this. I'm pretty good. I can do a dog pretty well. Yes, that really was me. Abby, what do you got?
There you go. Guess what that animal is?
Abby pulling out the pig. You actually do. I thought you were going to pull out your turkey. Abby's actually. Abby, he's doing the whole farm. It's Earth Day. You can call it. You can make noises of wild animals or farm animals if you want. You can also, though, turn serious on us if you'd like and tell us what you're most concerned about. I know a lot of people are talking about being concerned that the environment has been absent from the election campaign. But what is it when you think about, Earth, climate, what is it that gets you motivated, activated, and what are your concerns here as a Manitoban? So you can call us 788-3205 on this Earth Day. Let's move to business news next. Crystalie Ramlakan's here at 641. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
I won't make you do any pig sounds, don't worry.
Okay.
Or birds or otherwise. Let's talk about the markets yesterday. Some people were off yesterday for Easter Monday, of course, but the markets were open for trading. How are they looking to start the week?
Yeah, well, stock markets tumbled again yesterday as investors became even more skeptical about American investments. And many economists blame President Donald Trump's trade war and his ongoing criticism of the U.S. Federal Reserve. So losses for Tesla and Nvidia dragged down the Nasdaq. But here in Canada, the main S&P TSX index fell less than 1%. But U.S. government bonds and the value of the U.S. dollar sank. And that's unusual because the value of U.S. treasuries and the dollar have historically strengthened during episodes of nervousness. But this time around, experts say policies from Washington are potentially weakening their reputations as some of the world's safest investments. So last week, Trump criticized U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell again for not cutting interest rates sooner to give the economy more juice. But the Fed has been resistant to lowering rates too quickly because it does not want inflation to pick back up again after getting it down to its 2% goal from more than 9% 3 years ago.
To another story, Uber's being sued. What are the details here?
Yeah, that's right. So the Federal Trade Commission in the U.S. is suing, alleging deceptive billing and cancellation practices for the tech giant's Uber One subscription service. So the FTC alleges the company charged customers for the service, which includes free delivery and discounts on rides, without their consent and made it difficult to cancel, despite the company's cancel anytime marketing. But Uber says there was a rushed investigation by the FTC and says the complaint was based on misunderstandings. And the company says it's disappointed the FTC has chosen to move forward this way, but it's confident that Uber One's sign-up and cancellation processes are clear and simple. But the FTC also alleges Uber failed to deliver on promised savings for the subscription. So customers were promised savings of $25 a month, but the agency says that doesn't account for the cost of the subscription, which can be up to about $10 a month. So customers were also allegedly enrolled without their consent and were charged before the billing date. So for example, customers said they signed up for the free trial and then were automatically charged before the free trial even ended. And then when it comes to canceling, the FTC says users have been forced to click through up to 23 screens in order to cancel.
What's happening in the market so far right now?
In Europe, markets are moving lower. Germany is down, the UK is up, France is down. In Asia, markets are subdued. So Japan is down, Shanghai and Hong Kong are both up. Oil is up $1.06 to $64.14 US per barrel. Gold is up $29 to $3,452.40 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.08 of a cent to 72.3 cents US.
All right, thanks, Crystalie.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
Chrisley Ramlichan, a regular part of our CBC show. She's on with us daily with the business news. It is, as Abby mentioned, 7 degrees in Winnipeg, mostly cloudy and waiting for rain. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and you are on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, or maybe on YouTube where you're watching the sun come up over the buildings in downtown Winnipeg. Well, we have music this morning, a cover tune with a twist. It comes from Mitchell McCoons, who recorded his own version of Bill Withers' Ain't No Sunshine. And what you're going to hear, if you haven't heard this version before, are the lyrics flipping between English and Ojibwe, and that's what Mitchell says he heard in his household when he was growing up. Here's his version of a classic.
Kawin makuam siyapi enende Kawin gujiya siyapi enende Kawin makuam siyapi enende She's always gone too long Magico api manja I wonder this time where she's gone I wonder if she's gonna stay Ain't no sunshine when she's gone This house just ain't no home And Magico, I be my job Nigi kitam, I know. Nigi kitam, I know. Nigi kitam, I know. Nigi kitam, I know. Hey, gotta leave your thing alone. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. Kawin makuam siyapi only darkness every day. Kawin makuam siyapi enende, and she's always gone too long. Anytime she goes away. Nigi kitam, I know. Nigi kitam, I know. Nigi kitam, I know. I know. Said, hey, gonna leave me on the day alone. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone.
Pretty cool bilingual version from a Brandon artist, Mitchell McCoons, and his spin on the Bill Withers tune, Ain't No Sunshine.
Patio season is upon us, and the Winnipeg Comedy Festival is hosting some serious fun at the Gas Station Arts Center patio April 30th to May 4th. Featuring the Great Comedy Showdown, the music of DJ JPQ, and the CBC Fun Zone of patio games. Free, all ages, every festival day. The Winnipeg Comedy Festival. Seriously funny. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
Time right now, 11 minutes to 7 o'clock on CBC. Tuesday morning. Hopefully you had a great long weekend if you did have one, and a lovely Easter. It is mostly cloudy in the city. It's 7. Brandon's cloudy 2. Thompson mainly clear and -9. Well, let's return to the campaign trail because now we're less than a week to go before Election Day in this country. And some people may have taken the time to use an advance poll. Maybe that's something you did over the long weekend. Elections Canada said a record number of people voted on that first day of advance polls on Friday. The Federal Liberal Party, the NDP and the Green Party, as well as the Bloc, have also released their platforms. The Conservative Party says their fully costed platform will be out today. So Ryan Tumulty's here to tee up the day. He's a political reporter with the Toronto Star, of course, and with us on most Tuesday mornings. Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's start with a record number of people on that first day of advance polling. What, if anything, does that say to you about this election?
You know, to me, it says people are engaged in this election, that they're interested. And certainly, you know, we've seen that from the beginning. Most of the pollsters have told us that, you know, they're seeing people answer that question about, you know, how definite are you to vote, you know, more positively. People are paying more attention. You know, it's almost a cliche for politicians to say it's the most important election of our time. But I think this time, with Trump's threats to our economy and to our sovereignty, people are really feeling that. And I think ultimately that'll be reflected in the overall voter turnout.
For who? Does a big turnout for advance polls benefit any party in particular?
I mean, the political parties will tell you, every political party will tell you that it benefits them the most. I don't think we'll know that until next week. Certainly, you know, the Liberal argument that it's a sign that people are turning out for Mark Carney and wanting to give him a strong mandate to confront Trump has some reason to it. But so does the Conservative argument that it's a vote for change, that people are showing up because they want to see the Liberals, you know, tossed from power after a decade in. So I think the only way we'll know who this benefited is when the votes are counted.
The platforms, let's talk about those. So the federal Liberals, the NDP, the Greens, the Bloc, all their platforms are out. What stood out for you in terms of what's common among the platforms?
Yeah, in terms about commonalities about the platforms, you're seeing obviously a lot of focus on how to respond to Trump. But there's some pretty big divergence, especially from the platforms we've seen so far. It'll be interesting to see what the Conservative one has. The Liberal platform, for example, has $130 billion in new spending. That is you know, on top of what Justin Trudeau was doing. And Justin Trudeau, of course, was not running surpluses. So that is a big set of commitments from the government. I would say you're seeing a lot of focus on defense as well across the party platforms. And, you know, just a real focus on a different way of approaching government.
The Conservative Party, obviously, as we've been saying, has not yet released its platform. It's coming today. But the leader, Pierre Poilievre, did say this weekend he believes that Canadians know 95% of what his government would do in power. How unusual is it for a major contender to not have a costed platform at this point in the campaign? And I just want to be fair here. How unusual is it that they all came this late?
Yeah, I mean, they did. They all came out pretty late. Usually platforms are out before the national debates. Certainly, they're definitely usually out before people start casting ballots. You know, the Greens were the only party that made that. The Greens and the Bloc were the only party that made that target. The NDP and the Liberals came out in the middle of advance voting over the weekend. And the Conservatives will come out today after millions of ballots have been cast. And certainly, you know, that is unusual. I do think that parties, you know, just from a media and tactic strategy, once they have released a platform, it's very hard for them to come out with something new, some sort of new commitment or promise, because that should have been in a platform. So, you know, I think from a media approach, they are looking to be able to say something new deep into the campaign, and that delays putting out a final platform.
I'm going to be a cynic here, Ryan, because I know that, I'm doing it on behalf of voters, because when I was out talking to different voters in Manitoba, some of them were saying, it doesn't really matter what they're going to cost out, they're not going to do it anyway. A lot of people just don't lean into believing that politicians can be held accountable, you know, especially on costed out things. Is that something that is sort of maybe speaks to the fact that we're not seeing these costed out platforms earlier?
No, I would say that, you know, I think that cynicism is understandable. But I think if you look back across governments, certainly a platform makes up about, 50% of what a government does. Events get in the way, and a government has to do a bunch of things that it had no plan for, but they come up and have to be responded to. So certainly for all of the parties, these platforms are a roadmap, though, of what they want to do, what their goal is. And we do have the benefit in Canada now that these platforms are costed by the parliamentary budget officer, who weighs in on how realistic they are. It's not a perfect process, and certainly, there can be tweaks. But it does give you a good sense of sort of, where the government might be 4 years hence if you support a particular party.
So next time you and I talk, there'll be a new prime minister.
Or the same.
What's that? Or the same. Yeah. Well, no, it'll be a new person no matter what, I guess. Could be the same party. But however, the point is we're close. So what's the push look like to you now, Ryan? I mean, what do you expect to see and hear from the major party leaders in these last few days of the campaign?
Yeah, I think what we are seeing is a race that has really coalesced around the Liberals and the Conservatives, which is unusual for Canada. But the NDP are pretty far back in public opinion polls. I think they'll be making a case for their individual existing MPs, but I'm not sure you're going to see a lot of growth from the party in this campaign. The Liberals and the Conservatives, it's not so much different priorities or different promises, though of course they do have those. I think for these two parties now, it is about fundamentally different issues. So Liberal voters tend to see Trump as the most important issue. Conservative voters tend to see affordability as the most important issue and cost of living. I think you'll see from the two leaders that in this last week, with nothing new to announce because their platforms are out, they will be trying to keep the conversation on those issues.
Thank you. And of course, you're right. Mark Carney is the prime minister now, just for that handful of days before the election was called. But thank you. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thank you.
That's Ryan Tumulty, a political reporter with the Toronto Star. Let's go to Heather Wells now, 3 minutes to 7 o'clock on your Tuesday morning, and find out what's making news in Manitoba.
Good morning. Well, a U.S.-based organization is moving its operations to Manitoba as the uncertainty of U.S. tariffs continues. Global Vision 2020 gives eyeglasses to people in developing countries. The lenses and frames come from China. The U.S. recently imposed a 145% tariff on Chinese imports, meaning costs for those who need affordable eyewear would almost double. A residential school survivor says Pope Francis did the right thing when others would not. Phil Fontaine spent decades pushing the Catholic Church to apologize for its role in Canada's residential school system. Francis delivered that landmark apology in 2022 when he visited Canada. We'll hear more from Phil Fontaine and others in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
In the next hour of Information Radio, we're going to talk about Earth Day, which is today. We're going to hear from a grandmother and a granddaughter who are going to weigh in on how their different generations think about Earth Day and environmental issues. In addition, tributes from around the world do continue for Pope Francis. We're going to hear more about his life and legacy in a full interview in the next hour of the program. And then also we have one of the archbishops from here in Manitoba that's going to join us after 8 to talk about the future of the church and where it goes from here and what kind of a pope might come next. Will that pope be more conservative than Francis? Will that pope continue some of the more progressive policies? We'll ask that of one of the archbishops. And then as well, we have our partisan political panel. The federal election now in the final days. The campaigns have been filled with promises. But what about the issues that haven't made the headlines? We're going to put some of those to our political panel, and that's what I'm asking on Facebook today. What issues are not being discussed in this election campaign that you care about? You can weigh in or call 788-3205. You're with Information Radio on CBC. In traffic on the morning commute, call us if you see any problems. 788-3093 with updates. Weather-wise, it's 7. It's cloudy. It's going to rain starting around noon and be wet the rest of the day. Our high 13. And it's going to be snowy in parts of west central Manitoba. 10 to 20 centimeters expected through Dauphin, Minnedosa, Swan Valley, and Duck Mountain Provincial Park. So that's going to start. It already has, in fact, and continue through the day. Drive safely up there and stay with us for World Report.
Election, your vote matters more than ever. CBC News is your go-to with real-time election tools, helping you make an informed decision. Use Vote Compass to find out which party is closest to your views. Compare election platforms from Canada's major parties with the Party Platform Tracker. And in the lead-up to the election, find out where the polls stand with Poll Tracker. Because this is your vote. Canada Votes 2025. Visit cbcnews.ca or download the free CBC News app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. People gathering in St. Peter's Square to remember Pope Francis. The Vatican says Francis will be laid to rest on Saturday morning. The funeral service will begin at 10 o'clock Rome time at St. Peter's Basilica. The public viewing at the Basilica begins tomorrow morning. And today, Catholics around the world are holding Mass. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing has the latest.
We pray to the Lord. Lord, hear our prayer. In Manila, there's unity in sorrow.
I cried. I cried a lot.
There are more than 80 million Catholics in the Philippines. Here, like many places around the world, people are pausing to remember Pope Francis, including Filipino Cardinal Pablo Virgilio David.
Legacy talaga si Pope Francis sa amin not to take ourselves too seriously. Then not to stay on a pedestal. Come down, be human.
In Sydney, Archbishop Anthony Fisher offered parishioners comfort, acknowledging the years they had with Pope Francis and all he taught them.
But our Alleluias today are tinged with sadness as we join the Church throughout the world in marking the passing of our Holy Father, Pope Francis.
Oh, he was an extraordinary combination of humble but also incredibly steely and fearless.
Austin Ivory co-wrote the book Let Us Dream with Pope Francis during the pandemic.
I think his greatest quality was that he made people feel loved, special, dignified.
Ivory says he fostered a more human, more humble church and anticipates the next pope will continue on that path. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
In about 2 weeks, dozens of cardinals from around the world will be called back to the Vatican. They will have to vote on who will be the next pope. As Sharon Yonan-Reynolds reports, some Canadians could be among the contenders.
Next month, the College of Cardinals will convene in Rome to begin a process shrouded in mystery and intrigue.
You shouldn't underestimate, I think, the importance of the liturgical differences.
J.D. Flynn is editor-in-chief of The Pillar, a Catholic media organization. He says cardinals' choices will be between a leader that carries Pope Francis's legacy or someone with a more conservative approach.
Some people sort of say liturgy needs to get with the times. It needs to reflect kind of the ethos of our own culture. And some people say, no, we have this vast repository of culture and history and tradition, and we need to draw from that.
Flynn says the Vatican's Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin, regarded as a moderate, is a serious contender. 5 Canadian cardinals will attend the conclave, 4 of whom are eligible to vote. Emma Anderson is a professor of religious studies at the University of Ottawa. She says Canadian Michael Cherney, who heads the Vatican office responsible for migrants, charity, and development, could be an interesting candidate.
He's very, very big on social justice. In fact, if anything, he's probably a little bit left of Pope Francis himself.
There's also the Archbishop of Quebec, Gerald Lacroix, who serves on the Cardinal Council of Advisors.
He's kind of a savvy Vatican insider. This Gerald Lacroix was quite high up, right, in meeting with the Pope that regularly and giving him intimate spiritual advice.
But she says little is certain in a vote that can take anywhere from mere hours to years. Sharon Yonan-Reynolds, CBC News, Montreal.
Turning now to the Canadian federal election, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre releases his party's platform today. He says it will be complete and fully costed, but this platform is coming a little later in the campaign. The Liberals and New Democrats released theirs over the weekend. Let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, millions of Canadians have already voted. Does a platform release at this stage even matter?
Marcia, no matter how early or late they came out, it is possible that in this campaign, it was always going to be more about leading in a crisis. Look, whether you respond to that crisis by axing taxes and axing regulations to give people a break and stimulate the economy, as we're going to see Pierre Poilievre proposing today, or whether you're spending, as Mark Carney would spin it, investing to build, baby, build in this time of crisis. Let's be frank. Neither of these are fiscal austerity platforms. And there's a good argument out there that balanced budgets maybe aren't really the point or the priority in a world where Donald Trump's tariffs may be about to trigger a global recession. Politically, belt tightening is always tough medicine to get voters to swallow. But that is exactly what the Liberals have been warning the Conservative plan will require in order to pay for its tax cuts. Mark Carney was out yesterday accusing Poilievre of hiding that.
Cutting to the core of institutions, cutting to the vulnerable,
cutting to all Canadians is not the way you get out of a crisis. It's not the right approach.
Well, the Conservatives were slow to release their own math. That left the Liberals free to tally up their own takes on what's going to get the chop. That put Pierre Poilievre on the defensive, claiming Liberal math is wrong and a fourth Liberal government will exacerbate economic problems, not solve them.
So he's now $130 billion more expensive than Trudeau. And that will mean higher taxes and inflation. It will mean a serious risk to the future of our already weak economy.
Platforms are policy documents, but this is also personal because Poilievre's built his political reputation criticizing government finances. But polls right now suggest voters are preferring his opponent, who's spent his entire career managing inflation and volatile markets.
All right, thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. The NDP is trying to mobilize its base in the final weeks of this election. Last night in British Columbia, the party held its first rally of the campaign, and leader Jagmeet Singh warned what could happen if support for New Democrats collapses. David Thurton reports.
In this election, British Columbians will decide what happens next, whether Mark Carney gets a supermajority or whether there are enough New Democrats in Parliament to hold the line.
At a rally last night in Port Moody, British Columbia, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh built the case that Canada needs what the NDP has to offer.
In the last Parliament, New Democrats delivered dental care, the first steps of farmer care, and we did that without a majority.
Singh has spent the last couple of days touring ridings his party already holds seats in, where polls suggest NDP incumbents are at risk of losing. Not far from people's minds are what's at stake for the NDP in this election.
Who remembers 1993? We lost party status.
Libby Davies is a former Vancouver New Democrat MP. She warned the crowd about what happens when the NDP disappears.
The Liberal government went to the right. They took money out of the Canada Health and Social Transfer. They balanced the budgets on the backs of poor people. And you know why they did that? Because we weren't there.
Davies urged party volunteers to remind voters about this in the final days of this campaign. David Thurton, CBC News, Port Moody, British Columbia.
Jury selection begins today in London, Ontario for the trial of 5 hockey players. The men all face charges tied to an alleged group sexual assault in a player's hotel room in 2018. The accusations brought a reckoning to the governing body, Hockey Canada, and they sent shockwaves through the country's hockey culture. Kate Dubinsky has more on the trial.
Their names are known in the hockey world. Michael McLeod and Cal Foote were with the New Jersey Devils, Dylan Dubé with the Calgary Flames, and Carter Hart with the Philadelphia Flyers. Alex Formanton had played with the Ottawa Senators. Today, the international media spotlight will turn from the ice to the Superior Court of Justice in London, Ontario, where each of the 5 make pleas to sexual assault charges. The complainant, whose name is protected by a publication ban, says the 5 players assaulted her after a night out celebrating their World Junior Hockey win. Proceedings will be closely watched by people in the hockey world and the legal community. Kat Owens is a lawyer with the Women's Legal Education and Action Fund.
What we'd be looking for is a reflection of the clear legal rules that exist around consent in this country and that have existed for a long time.
Legal experts say the case will rest on the evidence and the credibility of the complainant. Each player's lawyers will have a chance to cross-examine her. That's likely to be a difficult watch, says Jessie Roger. They're with Inova, an agency for victims of gender-based violence.
We're feeling very deeply for the young woman at the center of this case, knowing that what she is about to go through is going to be really difficult.
The trial is scheduled to last 8 weeks. Kate Dubinsky, CBC News, London, Ontario.
And Kate has more on that story on our main page at cbcnews.ca, including a link to the story of what happened with Hockey Canada. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We've got a nice spring morning on our hands. It is going to rain later and clean everything up. and it's going to snow in parts of the province. So Abby's in a moment to talk about where that region is that the snowfall warning is for. It is West Central. Well, this hour on the program, it is also Earth Day. And if you're looking for a way to celebrate, we're going to hear more about something happening through a group called Seniors for Climate. But we have an interview, actually, with a grandmother and a granddaughter who are going to talk about Earth Day, the environment, and what they care about. They're in studio live. Also this hour on Information Radio on CBC, tributes continue to pour in for Pope Francis, who died on Easter Monday. We're going to hear more about his life and legacy and where the church will go next. There's some concerns about whether or not some of the progressive policies will continue. And then there's others who say they believe the church should return to a more conservative stance. So we'll have that discussion this hour. We also have one of the archbishops that will join us live after 8. And because it's a busy time, we have our partisan election panel that will be here to talk about the issues that are not being discussed on the campaign trail now that we're less than a week to go. Busy morning. It is 7:11 right now. Heather Wells is in with developments on other stories.
Good morning. Well, a member of Winnipeg's Jewish community says hate has no place regardless of politics. Campaign signs from incumbent Conservative MP Marty Morantz were vandalized in his riding over the long weekend. Some had graffiti that made him look like Adolf Hitler. Avram Shirak says that is not the way to voice political disagreements. Winnipeg police say they are investigating graffiti in Tuxedo. Downtown Winnipeg sure got loud last night. Thousands at the sold-out Whiteout Street Party outside Canada Life Centre. Inside, the Jets beat the Blues, taking a 2-0 lead in that playoff series. We'll hear more about it in our next local news at 7:30.
Woohoo! Good times.
Honestly, so much fun.
I know. It really has been so much fun. People go all out with the costumes. I would, if I wore white makeup all over my face like that for the whiteout, it would just be like completely melting off. I don't know how people keep it on the whole game.
You know, and they're so creative. Like the wigs. There's two guys though. There's on the platform X, if you go to it, there's two guys wearing white shirts, but they have the photo of Brendan Tanev with that crazy-eyed face.
Oh yeah.
It's like says it all. I love it.
Oh, it's fun. Yeah, people are super creative. They should have a contest. Have the Jets ever run a contest for the fan that sort of, brings the best costume?
That's a good idea.
It is a good idea. We should email them later. We'll get credit for it. All right, let's get into what's happening in the forecast here. Mother Nature not getting credit for perfect weather today. We actually have some snow coming, Abby.
Not at all, Marcy. It's going to be wet and cloudy and snow in the forecast today. Snowfall warning currently in effect for parts of western Manitoba. It's going to be impacting Dauphin, Russell, and surrounding areas. Snow at times, we're looking at about 10 to 20 centimeters expected, and it's going to be heavy sometime this morning. It will continue into tonight, then it's going to be easing tomorrow morning. So 10 to 20 centimeters once the system comes through, with the heaviest likely in areas with higher elevation. And this warning extends even into some southern regions, impacting Manitoba, the Swan Valley, and the Riding Mountain National Park areas. So this will continue through the day for that part of the province. Looking at conditions in the Red River Valley region, currently Winnipeg still at 7 degrees, mostly cloudy outside. The sun struggling to make an appearance, but the clouds, it's going to be more like winning the battle this morning. We have rain in the forecast. It's about to roll in around the noon period with winds coming from the east. It gets breezy at some point. We warm up to 13 degrees later, and as the day progresses into the evening, the rain continues also. We're looking at about 5 to 10 millimeters overnight, with temperatures dropping to around 3 degrees. And across the province, the Pembina Valley region, and even into the Interlake region, we're seeing a mix of rain and wet snow expected in some parts of that the regions. But right now, Winnipeg, 7 degrees, cloudy, breezy, rain expected around the noon period.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
The sun's going to be more like a cameo. We'll go, oh yeah, it's looking good.
Hi.
Hey. Corey Funk, The Drive, what's up?
Yeah, just took a look at Manitoba 501. Around Roblin, the highways now are starting to be reported as partly covered, so it could mean less than ideal conditions there. Curious what that looks like for you if you are out on the highway, though. You can give me a call on the CBC commuter line if you're seeing anything out there, if you're walking, biking, driving. Would love to hear from you. 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, today is Earth Day, and in celebration, Seniors for Climate is putting on Earth Day celebrations locally in front of the Manitoba legislature. That's going to happen later this morning. So bring an umbrella and welcome the rain. This is the second time the group is hosting Earth Day events in Winnipeg. There's going to be live music, some sing-alongs, and some speeches by school-age kids and youth. So it's a day to have fun, but it's also a day to draw attention to climate change. To talk about the environment, climate change, and Earth Day, this morning we have a grandmother and a granddaughter in studio. Pat Wally is with Seniors for Climate. Hi, Pat.
Hello there.
Thanks for being here.
You're more than welcome.
And you also have with you Honora Katu, who's 13, who is, I understand, your granddaughter.
Yes.
Hi, Honora. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. So let me start for you. Tell me a little bit about why you lean into caring about the earth and what worries you as a young person.
I think it's very important that we learn about the earth and take care of it to help preserve our natural environment and keep it safe from the damage that we're doing to it.
Is it something that you talk about with your peers?
Yes, as much as I can.
Yeah.
So.
Is it something you worry about?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, do you guys talk about it generationally, I wonder, Pat? Does it come up in the family or?
Some, because I'm very busy with the climate advocacy. There's some discussion. Not a lot, but some.
Tell me a little bit about where your concerns come from and why you got involved in climate advocacy.
Okay, I got involved actually with Seniors for Climate because in 23, senior Swiss women took their country to the European Court because they were not protecting them from climate change. And they won. They won a decision from the European Court that said that the Swiss government needed to make changes to protect their seniors.
And how were seniors not protected from climate change? Like what? You don't have to know the exact.
Well,
basis of it.
they were not doing enough to reduce fossil fuels, to use alternate energy sources, any of those things. And I felt that because if women in Switzerland can do this, why the heck can't somebody in Canada do it? And I went looking for a national group that was doing that, and there wasn't one.
What worries you as a senior when you look at the world, and even when you think about the world in your life, you know what I mean, and how things have changed climate-wise?
Well, things have certainly changed. We just need to think about 23 and the wildfires that meant we couldn't go outside for days because there was so much snow in the air. And there's all the floods and all kinds of things are happening, unnatural events that are being caused because when we burn fossil fuels, the carbon goes into the atmosphere and it stays there for centuries. And that's affecting our climate. And if we don't slow it down, it will just get worse and worse. And people like Honora's kids may not be able to go outside at all because they won't be able to breathe the air.
Obviously, we're amidst an election right now, and on the campaign trail, there's been a lot of criticism that we're not hearing enough about this. How do you feel about that, Honora? Do you think that leaders are taking this seriously enough?
I think that they're definitely trying, but I think they could try a little harder.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm much older than you, but in school, when in my day, it was the ozone layer that they talked about. The ozone layer, we need to do something about the ozone layer, and then it actually led to an improvement in the ozone layer. It's often held up by Gen X as this thing that actually we can change things. What's your experience been like? You're 13, so would you have in school been thinking and studying and talking and hearing about climate issues around the world, or is it more in your personal life that the environment comes up?
I think it's more in my personal life, but in school we definitely talk about it and about the ozone layer too. And I think the ozone layer was the first thing that came up about it.
Yeah. And now in terms of like historic fire years and stuff, do you follow the different changes in Canada?
I follow about it personally, but not in school.
Yeah. Well, what do you hope that other young people your age take away from having Earth Day events like the one that's coming up today?
I would hope that they would try and participate if they could and are able.
Why do you want to participate?
To just take a stand for what I think is right in the world.
What's going to be happening at the rally today, at the event today?
Well, the event starts at the Ledge at 11:30. and the rain is going to stay off. It'll wait.
Positive thoughts.
Abby was
I like
saying
it.
early after, after 12. Well, let's make it after 1.
Okay.
But
I don't know if we have that kind of poll, but Abby can try.
We'll try. There's going to be live entertainment. There's going to be school groups talking and singing as groups. There's going to be drumming and some speeches. And we're hoping to get in to talk to the Minister of the Environment. That's still up in the air.
And what would you say should you get that meeting?
We want, our new government has been in office 18 months, and they do not have a progressive plan in place. We're asking that they adopt a progressive plan by the end of June this year.
By the end of June is your timeline.
Yeah, we need to get going.
Mm-hmm.
This is a crisis that needs to get addressed. The longer we wait, the worse it gets.
How worried are you about looking at the federally that the carbon tax has been cut without a lot of detail from any of the parties about what plan might replace that? Now I'm talking about the Conservatives and the Liberals because they both have supported cutting that.
Unfortunately, the Liberals did a terrible job of publicizing and explaining the carbon tax. It's gone now, and I'm sure it won't be back. But there still is a tax on large polluters, and I think that needs to continue and maybe be more so. Our oil and gas company, the large oil and gas companies, between 2019 and 2022, had 1,000% increase in their profit. If they're making those kinds of profits, that's why we've got the inflation that we've got. If so many things depend on transportation, and which is mostly oil and gas, that this is what's caused the inflation, and they're getting away, and we're still subsidizing them.
Have a good turnout today at your events, and hopefully the rain will hold off. Thank you both for being here this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is Pat Wally, who's with Seniors for Climate, and her granddaughter, Honora Coutu, who's 13 years old. They're both going to be at the event later this morning. The Earth Day celebration is happening in front of the legislature, starts at 11:30. Set time now is 7:22.
Public service announcements. PSAs have to work twice as hard as regular commercials to get noticed. So ad agencies use techniques like nostalgia, an emotional connection, and celebrities.
This is Elvis Presley. Thousands who know the fight against polio is just as tough as it ever was.
The power of PSAs on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
The following airtime is available for messages provided by registered political parties as required by the Canada Elections Act.
Oh, I can't keep up with the news.
Who can?
Take this federal election. Looked like Poilievre was going to win, and now Carney's got a big lead?
Yeah, but even if he wins, we need the NDP there to fight for us.
Agreed. They got us a bunch of good stuff. Dental care, pharmacare, childcare.
I just don't want to wake up after the election and realize there's no one there to speak up for us regular folks.
Same. I'm sticking with the NDP. Sounds like we're going to need them.
Authorized by the registered agent for the New Democratic Party of Canada.
The proceeding was a paid political ad. 7:24 a.m. and Scott Regehr is back. Hello.
Good morning, Marcy.
You know what we were doing for Earth Day? I was trying to see if people would do a wildlife animal impression, if they could sound like an animal. And yeah, as you can imagine, it hasn't taken off at all.
You didn't lead the charge then?
No, I barked like a dog. I couldn't even do a wild animal. Corey did a little bird impression. Abby was doing some pig sounds. But what do you got, Regehr?
For radio consumption right now? I'll beg off, but ask me another time, and I'll be ready with my coyote. I don't want to wake people up the wrong way this morning.
Okay. I'm going to leave that dangling there. Let's talk hockey. After the first time in a long time, the Jets won a second game in a playoff series.
Yeah, they did so yesterday against the St. Louis Blues. Thanks to their big stars, they won Game 2. Mark Scheifele scored the game's icebreaker and then later set up his line mate Kyle Connor for the game winner. Connor Hellebuck, he looked much like his usual self, stopped all but one of St. Louis's shots. Now, as mentioned, this is the first time since sweeping the Oilers in the bubble playoffs a few years ago that Winnipeg has come out on top in the second game of the series. Many fans will remember what happened the past couple of years where the Jets beat Vegas and Colorado in Game 1, only to lose the next 4 games and then the series. Connor was asked if snapping that streak will provide a boost to his team.
I don't know if it's a mental boost, but we're aware of it. This group is motivated. We talked about it over the offseason. We preached about it all year. It's in this room. Everybody needs to be bear down. It's dragging everybody into the fight. And it's a second win, but we're not resting here. We got a long ways to go and make adjustments if need be, and on to the next one.
Yeah, hopefully this momentum carries through into the rest of the series, which resumes in St. Louis on Thursday. Elsewhere, Marcy, Montreal and Edmonton both lost by a single goal last night in quite dramatic games in each case. We'll hope for more drama this evening. The Battle of Ontario continues. Toronto up after a pretty feisty opening win against the Senators.
Hockey dominated Easter weekend, but it was not the only sport going on.
Right. We're in the midst of the NBA playoffs as well, of course, and there's plenty of Canadian content there. Kitchener's Jamal Murray, he had 23 points, but that wasn't enough. The Clippers beat Murray's Nuggets and have tied that series up at a game apiece. There is Hamilton's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, best player in the league this year. He and his Thunder tried to take a 2-0 lead against Toronto's Zach Edey and the Grizzlies tonight. Switching over to running. At the Boston Marathon yesterday, what a performance by Rory Linkletter. The Calgarian Marcy finished the world's most prestigious race in 6th place.
As a breakthrough race, best marathon of my career, I told myself if I put myself in it and was able to race all the way to the line, it would probably be a special day. And there was a lot of moments where I didn't know if that was going to happen because the race gets hard early here. We went out fast and I hung on. If you're going to be stupid, you got to be tough.
Not so sure about stupid, but Linkletter was definitely tough yesterday. His time of just over 2 hours and 7 minutes, the second fastest marathon ever run by a Canadian. Only Cam Levins has gone quicker. That was a couple of years ago at the Tokyo Marathon.
Wow. And doing it in Boston, that's a hard race.
Yeah.
Finally, the death of Pope Francis is being felt around the world today. We have a legacy interview coming up, in fact. But the sports world actually is feeling this as well.
Yeah, for sure. Italy's top soccer league, Serie A, postponed all of its matches yesterday, Marcy, with news of his passing. Pope Francis loved the sport, having played it as a kid in Argentina, although by his own admission, Marcy, he wasn't a great player. His nickname was Hardfoot. Francis loved to follow footy, though. He was a lifelong supporter of the team San Lorenzo, according to podcast host Santiago Bauza.
There's stories of how he was interviewed by journalists during his stint as a pope, and they were wowed by his memory, like historic quotes from the 1940s and his recollection of games from that era as well. And he lived very much like any other Argentine would, with extreme passion and with a lot of outpour of love for the sport and for his team, San Lorenzo.
Before he became Pope, Marcy, Francis followed San Lorenzo and Argentina's national team on the radio, because he didn't like TV very much. When he became pontiff, he gave up the radio as well and got his soccer reports from his security detail, the Swiss Guard. That is how he learned Lionel Messi had led Argentina to victory at the last World Cup. He was asked whether he thought Messi or compatriot Diego Maradona was the greatest player of all time, and Pope Francis replied, actually, it was Pelé, which will have delighted the country with the largest number of Catholics of all, Brazil.
Love that little anecdote. Thanks for bringing it to us. All right, Scott, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds good.
That's Scott Regehr with Morning Sports. We're coming up to news time here. I've asked online, can you hear the crickets I wrote on Facebook? What issues aren't being discussed in this election campaign that you care about? Some comments coming in. Andrea Richardson says, for her, it's Canada's student loans, and she says the refusal to discuss how to better the doctor forgiveness grant so it creates better process for remote communities that need all clinical services with regards to doctors. We also have Kev Roberts writing in reconciliation, and And Judy Herskovich saying a life above poverty for Canadians who have medical disabilities and that do not allow for employment and who rely on income assistance. So you're writing in about what you're not hearing enough on the campaign trail. I'm raising the responses because that is what our partisan panel will be about in this half hour of the program. We're going to look at some of the issues that you've told us are slipping through the campaign cracks. That's coming up in the next half hour after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is 7 degrees. Get set for some April showers. Depending where you are, if you're in western Manitoba, it's going to be April snow. You have a snowfall warning for Dauphin and area, up to 20 centimeters possible. In Winnipeg, rain begins around noon, a high today of 13. A member of Winnipeg's Jewish community says hate has no place regardless of politics. Campaign signs from incumbent Conservative MP Marty Morantz were vandalized in his riding over the long weekend. Some had graffiti that made him look like Adolf Hitler. Avram Sharak says that is not the way to voice political disagreements.
It should never happen. It doesn't matter what faith group you're from, what country your family came from 100 years ago, whatever the case may be. We're all Canadians, and you should just respect, not destroy or deface or try to make people feel uncomfortable.
Winnipeg West Liberal candidate Doug Ailson issued a statement supporting Morantz. Ailson says anti-Semitism has no place in Canada regardless of political agreements. Experts say bail reform is not the way to fix a revolving door of reoffenders in the justice system. Winnipeg defense lawyer Christopher Gamby says those offenses are often things like property crime, and a better approach, he says, would be to address issues like addiction that cause people to reoffend over and over again.
Pope Francis was compassionate.
This idea that bail reform is going to be how we make wholesale changes to the justice system and make our society dramatically safer, with the greatest respect, I just don't see it.
Calls for bail reform have grown in Manitoba in recent months. Municipal leaders recently gathered to raise their concerns about the issue ahead of the upcoming federal election. Well, the former head of the Assembly of First Nations says Pope Francis had a deep relationship with Indigenous people. Phil Fontaine pushed for decades to get the Catholic Church to apologize for its role in Canada's residential schools. Francis delivered that apology in 2022 when he visited Canada. Fontaine says Francis did what other Catholic leaders would not.
Pope Francis was a compassionate person. He was humble. And his humility took him to a place where his predecessors were unable to go. We now have an opportunity to work on reconciliation together.
And now the question is, who will replace Pope Francis? Francis was seen as a progressive pope. He apologized to Indigenous people, as we just heard, and welcomed the LGBTQ plus community. Indigenous Studies professor Negon Sinclair at the University of Manitoba worries the next pope will be a very conservative traditionalist.
What are the factors that go into picking a pope? And do they consider the really critical progressive elements that Pope Francis did regionally? And I'm not just talking about Canada now, I'm also talking about Europe. I'm also talking about South America. I'm talking about Africa.
Sinclair says the next pope should return stolen land to Indigenous people. Jury selection is scheduled to begin today in London, Ontario, in the trial of 5 former World Junior hockey players. Each of the players is charged in connection to an alleged sexual assault dating back to June of 2018. At the time, the team was in London for a Hockey Canada gala celebrating its gold medal win at that year's World Juniors. All 5 former players are expected to plead not guilty. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. An American nonprofit is moving its warehouse to Manitoba because of challenges caused by U.S. tariffs. Global Vision 2020 provides eyeglasses to people in developing countries. Their raw materials, things like lenses and frames, come from China. And right now, the U.S. has slapped a 145% tariff on Chinese imports. That would mean costs and prices for their glasses would almost double. Greg Wiens is the organization's director of operations. He says the price increase would lead to fewer people around the world getting proper eyewear.
I'm thinking the most about my team that I partnered up with in Congo. They can't swallow that type of sudden increase. So going through Canada will keep that price the same prices that they're used to.
The nonprofit will move production to Manitoba this summer. Well, plenty of white noise in Winnipeg last night. Thousands at the sold-out Whiteout Street party outside Canada Life Centre. Inside, the Jets beat the Blues, taking a 2-0 lead in the playoff series. Fan Lana Thiessen makes a prediction.
I definitely see a Jets sweep, but I don't want to jinx it, so knock on wood. But I'll be here in the building on Sunday, so I'm hoping for a Jets sweep, but I definitely see a Jets win.
Well, the Jets did win last night, and here's the goal that sealed the deal. Kyle Connor in the third period on Sportsnet as the Jets beat the Blues 2-1. Head coach Scott Arniel knows the Jets historically have had trouble winning that second playoff game, but
our compete level is where it needs to be for playoff hockey. It's something we talked about from the very beginning, that it isn't just our big guys, our big heavy guys. It has to be everybody, and I thought our puck battles were real strong tonight.
Sounds like his voice isn't that strong there. Maybe he was yelling a little bit there. Now the Jets try to keep their strength going as they head into Blues territory. Game 3 in the series is in St. Louis on Thursday night. 8:30 Central Time is the start. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
My guilty pleasure last night watching the game was watching the coach of the Blues, because I don't know if he did it as a nervous habit or he just likes to do it, but he was singing like the songs. You know?
Really?
Yeah, you could see him mouthing the words. And then at one point, he was just sort of bopping his shoulders up and down to the beat.
Wow, he sounds relaxed.
Yeah, well, he looked relaxed, actually. Or maybe it's a, method of stress relief. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the forecast. It's time for your regional forecast here on CBC with Abby Adiemi.
Let's look at what's happening across the province. In the Red River Valley region at this time, 7 degrees in Winnipeg under mostly cloudy skies. Rain is expected to move in around the noon period. That will continue into the evening with breezy easterly winds. We'll see highs around 13 degrees. Similar conditions in the Pembina Valley region. We're seeing temperatures around 4 degrees at this time. Rain also starting around the noon period, and that would continue through the day. We're looking at 5 to 10 millimeters expected once this system comes through. As we head west to Brandon, 2 degrees in that region. Rain is also in the mix with wet snow this morning. We could see 10 to 15 millimeters in total. Highs will hit 6 degrees. Shifting to the Parkland region where conditions are more severe. Dauphin surrounding areas 0 at this time. Light snow falling. That will continue through the day. We have that snowfall warning in that region. It will pick up intensity, particularly over higher terrain. We're looking at 5 to 10 centimeters expected overnight with lows around -2. In Gimli, 3 degrees at this time. Expect cloudy skies with rain developing around the afternoon period. Winds will stay light from the northeast. Highs today will be around 13 degrees, and that rain will continue into the overnight period. We're looking at 5 to 10 millimeters also expected. Traveling into the northern part of the province, we see clear skies at this time. The sun already making its appearance in most of the regions. The flim flow on the parts surrounding areas -5 at this time, aiming for a high of 7. Thompson is at -10. Sunny conditions at this time, aiming for a high of 4 degrees, and Churchill -13 at this time. It's going to be clear skies and sunny conditions throughout the day. Highs will be around -6.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
With a quick look at traffic, here's Corey.
Taking a look at Manitoba 511 right now, and it seems like around Roblin is where those weather conditions are starting to cause partly covered conditions. So not like awful, but not ideal. So just heads up there. We'd love to get some phone calls from folks if you do see something going on out there. You can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, I want to mention something that's happening on Thursday. If you're a regular listener, then you know the last number of weeks, last 3 weeks to be correct, we have been out in different ridings in the city of Winnipeg. So we took you to Elmwood-Transcona, to Winnipeg South, to Winnipeg West. This Thursday, we're not going to be out of the studio, but we are going to get you out to different ridings to hear from voters specifically. We're trying to get over the perimeter-itis and get out into different areas of rural Manitoba. So Thursday's show is going to be a kind of a 360 look look around Winnipeg at some of the different communities that we visited for our initiative Communities in Focus. We're going to touch base with some of the folks that we met, and we're going to hear from them what they're thinking around the election and around the vote and what the buzz is in their corner of the province. I've already confirmed that we're going to be talking to a voter in Virden, so interesting conversation there. We also are going to be talking to people from the north. There's a number of, the north is so vast, of course, but it's just one ride, mostly represented by one riding federally. So we're going to get you north, south, east, and west, all around to find out what people are thinking about as the election day draws near. So, of course, election day coming up on Monday. If you want to read, by the way, we're in the window of time now where people are starting to really think about, you might be thinking about how do I vote? Where do I vote? What do I have to bring with me when I vote? You can read all of those protocol details at cbc.ca. Right now it is 20 to 8 on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. And next on the show, Catholics around the world continue to pay tribute to Pope Francis, who died on Easter Monday. He was 88. He died of a stroke and heart failure, according to the Vatican. He's being remembered as the first pope from Latin America, and a man who championed the cause of the poor and the vulnerable. Now, we were on the air yesterday, so we heard a number of different perspectives, including from a musician now living in Winnipeg, Ana Lu, who actually knew the Pope when he was a cardinal. She was in Argentina, and so she talked about her memories of him speaking truth to power and how she felt about him as a person. Well, Emma Anderson is here, professor in the Department of Classics and Religious Studies at the University of Ottawa, to talk more about the Pope. Good morning. Good morning. Hi, yes, we've got you with us. Apologies. Thanks for being here. How would you assess Pope Francis's legacy?
I think that he's had a short but fantastic papacy. However, it has been a divisive one. While many throughout the Catholic world and outside the Church have really found Pope Francis's more liberal perspective to be a welcome breath of fresh air, there have been Catholic conservatives who've been very critical of what he's trying to do and this openness that he's shown, particularly towards LGBTQ plus people, and his stance on immigration, refugees, the poor, and the environment.
He had his last meeting with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. What were his attitudes, Pope Francis, to the religious right in the United States?
Not a fan, and neither were they a fan of his, although I did note this morning that President Trump had some nice things to say about Pope Francis, which is, shows that even though they didn't meet eye to eye on almost anything, he was nevertheless able to eulogize Pope Francis as a good man who worked hard. And that may not be much, but it's still a wonderful thing to say about somebody. We could all do better than having that said about us after our death. But yes, in terms of really with J.D. Vance and with Pope Francis, we get two very different visions of the future of the Roman Catholic Church. With J.D. Vance, it's the much more old-fashioned kind of form of Catholicism, much more reminiscent of Pope Benedict and Pope John Paul II. This is the culturally conservative form of Catholicism that tends to wag its finger at homosexuality, condemn abortion. In the old days, it was more about fighting communism, those sorts of things. What Pope Francis really wanted to do was turn the page on these kind of cultural hot-button issues to get to things that really matter more to people, younger people, and people outside of the Church, and that threaten our entire existence as a planet, like the environmental crisis. So one of the very first things he did upon becoming Pope in 2013 was to write a papal encyclical about environmental ills and what we could do by simplifying our lifestyles to try to save the earth together.
Full disclosure, your phone line's very challenging on the radio, so we'll leave our conversation there, but thank you very much for being with us this morning. We appreciate having you with us.
I'm very sorry about the bad quality line.
It's okay. It's not just you. It's this world we live in. Ironically, sometimes you get a clearer Zoom than a phone line. So, but thank you very much for speaking to his legacy. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
We will hear more on the Pope, and we have been for the last couple of days. Yesterday, we were on the air here, and we actually had 3 different distinct Manitoba perspectives on the death of the Pope. We have analysis coming up. It's at 8 o'clock on the legacy of Pope Francis. Emma Anderson has been with us here, professor in the Department of Classics and Religious Studies at the University of Ottawa. And one more thing to mention, after 8 o'clock here live, Archbishop Murray Chatelain of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Winnipeg will join us to talk about the Pope. And we're going to move the conversation because we've talked a lot about Pope Francis's death, his legacy. We've heard from Catholics, including Manitobans who identify as Catholic. But we're going to talk more about the actual future of the church. So some have said that they're not sure if the future of the church is going to be more conservative or more progressive. And so we're going to talk to the Archbishop about that live after 8.
They soar among the trees and enrich our Earth. And this Earth Day at Fort White Alive, learn about the birds with CBC. Join us at Fort White Alive's Earth Day celebration, April 27th, for a virtual bird tour. Follow the posted QR codes to learn some amazing bird facts. Fly with Fort White Alive and CBC this Earth Day. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
7:46 the time right now, and despite hearing the birds there, you're going to see the snow in parts of Manitoba today. There's a snowfall warning, 10 to 20 centimeters expected for west central Manitoba. We're talking Dauphin, Russell, McCreary, Swan Valley, and Duck Mountain Provincial Park. So the snow's already started for you. It's going to continue and just get heavier, as I mentioned, 10 to 20 centimeters. Here in southern Manitoba and in Winnipeg, it's looking like rain. So for us, the rain will start around noon, 5 to 10 millimeters. Brandon, rain mixed with wet snow already throughout your morning. And Winnipeg's daytime high will be 13 degrees. And Brandon, you're just going to get to about 6 degrees today. Well, here we go, people, right? In 6 days, Manitobans will join the rest of Canada in deciding who will be the next Prime Minister of the country. So far, the campaign trail has been filled with a lot of debate and discussion about tariffs and crime. But what about the issues that haven't made the headlines? So things perhaps that have not been talked about enough. Our political panel is going to tackle those this week. We're going to talk about reconciliation, immigration, and climate change here on Earth Day. We are joined by our political panel to get those conversations started. So as I've been saying, and I have been every week, all of them are devoted Manitobans and political veterans. Via Zoom, Dan Vandel in his final days before he steps down as Liberal MP for St. Boniface St. Vital. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning.
And also via Zoom this morning, Aaron Selby, former NDP MLA for Southdale here in Winnipeg. Hello, Aaron.
Good morning.
Everyone switched places today. In studio live, I have Dorothy Dobie with me, former Conservative MP for Winnipeg South and former Parliamentary Secretary. Good morning.
Good morning.
So just because we're inside 6 days, how are you feeling about your party right now as we push to the finish?
Well, I'm always nervous. I mean, it's the polls are very negative right now. I'm hoping we can pull a rabbit out of a hat. We'll see. The best I think we can hope for is a minority, but even that would be a good news story for me.
For the NDP, Aaron, how are you feeling? Just 6 days to go here.
I think that Jagmeet Singh did really good in the French and the English debates, and I'm hoping that's going to pick up our numbers. I also think the best thing would be a Liberal minority, because we know what good work got done when NDP had a voice at the table. And
Dan Vandel, how are your thoughts?
I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. I think everyone's been impressed by Mark Carney, his calmness and his experience and his sense that he is the adult in the room that we need to deal with Donald Trump. So I'm cautiously optimistic, and I think we really need to finish strong.
Well, let's see if some of these issues that voters say should be discussed are going to be maybe a factor at the ballot box. When I asked on Facebook first thing this morning about what issues aren't being discussed, the first handful of comments coming in, and one of them was reconciliation. So why don't we begin there, actually? And why don't we begin in studio with you, Dorothy? Some Indigenous leaders also are saying reconciliation's taken a back seat in the election. What are your thoughts on that? What's your reaction?
Well, it may have taken a backseat in the election because there's so many other things on the table, but I have to say that we must continue to do the things we're doing. The one thing that Indigenous people need is opportunity, and they need us to open up those possibilities for them so that they're no longer marginalized. I'm particularly concerned with the folks that are up north that are stuck in remote reserves where they can't get out. There's no hope. There's no possibility. The schools aren't very good, and they need to have an economy that they can build for themselves.
How will your party do that?
Well, one of the things, as you know, you may know we're doing, and I'm very glad to hear Wab Canoe say this, we're trying to build a second port on Hudson Bay, and it would be owned by the Indigenous people, led by Fox Lake and some of the other folks up there. And they're so excited about it because they see the possibilities, the spin-offs that can happen from having that. Just having the access to the outside world for many of those remote communities is a game changer.
Aaron Selby for the NDP, if you would speak to the questions. First, has reconciliation been missed in the conversation? And second, what would the NDP do?
I think you're right that perhaps we haven't been talking about it enough, but I know for the NDP, reconciliation means action. And I don't mean action like the Liberals have been doing by taking residential school survivors to court to try to fight what they deserve. I mean things like making sure that we have informed consent with anything that's happening with Indigenous people and with Indigenous nations. We still have boil water advisories on some First Nations, and that is a Liberal promise from way back that hasn't been fulfilled yet. I think it would be important to do things like the NDP are promising, invest in clean water infrastructure. I mean, that's one of the starts. But also, we need to look at some bigger things like an inquiry into systematic racism in the justice system. So I think there's a lot of actions that we're talking about that will help everybody. Things like capping grocery prices, certainly in the North. That's a real difficulty in trying to pay for just basic groceries. But also just to make sure that informed consent and holding up the treaty obligations that we have right now is really important in terms of mending our relationship.
Dan Vandel, I'll let you respond, but also responding to what Aaron said about your government and promising the boil water advisories. We still have them. Your Liberal government said that you get rid of them, and also the idea that residential school survivors are being taken to court by your party.
First of all, Indigenous issues and reconciliation have been not only a part of our party platform for 10 years. More importantly, they've been a part of our budget, where literally hundreds of billions of dollars have been invested with Indigenous nations for education, for housing, for health, for justice. We've removed 147 boil water advisories over the last 10 years. We've dealt with 3 years of COVID, where literally everything was shut down. There are 30 more boil advisories to lift, and they all have plans and budgets to do just that. As during our next mandate. So really, we have not been perfect on boiled water advisories, but 147 boiled water advisories lifted in 10 years is 147 more than Stephen Harper did in the previous Senate.
I want to lean into ideology for a moment. How do you see the relationship between a federal government that would be conservative and Indigenous peoples, Dorothy?
I think really it's a question of giving them the opportunity to take control of their own lives. I was Parliamentary Secretary to Indian and Northern Affairs for several years, and I traveled all across the country and met with many, many people. Most of them they felt like servants.
Does that mean government-to-government relationships?
It means people-to-people relationships, and however we work it out between us. I have no problem with having whatever you call government. It scares people, but it doesn't scare me. It's about respect for each other, partnerships the way we had partnerships in the very beginning when there were trading relations that were equally valuable to each side, and respect for people and listening and paying attention and working things out together in partnership. That's what they want, and that's the respect they deserve.
Aaron, is there a difference in ideology when you're hearing Dorothy talk about what the conservative approach would be to what an NDP government would, how that view would go of Indigenous people and First Nations?
I think we only have to look at the example of Manitoba and the relationship that we have here, and it's based on informed consent and making sure that it's not just the federal government that's making profit off of land and resources that are traditionally on Indigenous land, but to making sure that we're talking about informed consent, upholding treaties, and continuing forward with reconciliation.
And Dan Vandel, how do you view the ideology that the Liberal government?
Our relationship with Indigenous governments is nation to nation, is government to government. I've sat in meetings with the Prime Minister and all the ministers associated with Inuit leadership, with Métis leadership, with First Nation leadership, where we talked about the issues that were important to them and how we can move forward on them with the ministers and the Prime Minister in the room for half a day. That's never happened in Canadian history. So there's a lot of work to do. It's got to be followed up by investment and dollars. And let me talk about something very important locally, the Red River Métis Treaty, which we signed in November, but it still needs to be ratified by the House of Commons. That's a priority for the Liberal Party. And I can tell you, if Pierre Poilievre becomes Prime Minister, that treaty will die.
Do you want to respond to that? Just because that's a big statement.
It's a big statement. It means nothing.
Well, will that treaty die if Pierre Poilievre?
I have absolutely no idea. It hasn't been discussed with him, but I know how we react to people. The folks we try to react with respect and with person-to-person relationships.
We're being ambitious today, panel. I've got 2 more topics to get through in 4 minutes here, so let's move to immigration. Dan Vandel, we'll go to you first on this. Liberals say they'll maintain the cap on immigration. Well, actually, we'll outline this. Dorothy, the Conservatives have said they'd put a cap on asylum seekers. Aaron, the NDP, said they'll assess whether there are enough resources to welcome newcomers. It's all coming from your leaders. So to each of you then, why is your party's platform better than the others? Dan, you can start here.
Well, I think we have to maintain the cap until the housing and the other support services can catch up. People forget that, again, I'll mention COVID, where the world economy and the Canadian economy shut down for 3 years. And upon its reopening, we were lobbied very hard for temporary foreign workers, and we accommodated business because the workers were needed. Now we need to wait and let the housing and other support services catch up to the levels of immigration. And we view immigration as nothing other than positive for the Canadian economy and provincial economies.
Aaron?
Well, we certainly know that investments in housing have not kept up with the amount of people coming into Canada. But at the same time, we do need foreign workers. And certainly we saw that the Liberals put a cap right across the country with no thought into the fact that rural Manitoba still needs immigration. There are still places that need to have more people coming in. So it really has to be assessed. And that's why we're looking at a blue ribbon panel to properly review levels. And to not review levels right across the board of what works in Toronto necessarily works in Brandon, Manitoba. It has to be a region by region discussion, and also looking at what our labor market actually needs.
And Dorothy, to your leader's plan and the Conservative plan to put a cap, put a cap on asylum seekers.
Well, I think you're looking at a pause in the kind of levels of immigration that we've been allowing in without any kind of discrimination over the last number of years. We used to have a very good immigration system where we brought in people who would add value to the economy. We also had a family reconciliation system, which was great. But in the last number of years, it's just gone willy-nilly, and there's all sorts of possibility, all sorts of. I don't want to use the word undesirable, but I have to sort of say, yeah, there are a lot of people who got in who probably shouldn't be here. So we need a chance to stop, take a look, and see where we are going and how we should go. I agree that we need more people in the rural areas, but that's up to the rural areas to do what they can to attract people from the city, because there certainly is an overburden of folks who don't have enough places to live here, while there are empty houses in some of the rural areas in Manitoba. So there's a rebalancing that needs to happen, and so we just have to take it easy for a while.
Last question to each of you in our last minute here. It's Earth Day. Dorothy, how much of a lead should government take on combating climate change?
That's a loaded question. You can't leave that for 1 minute.
Well, you know what we can do? I'll tell you what. Are you free for the next 10 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So Dan, Aaron, are you guys free for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes, I am.
Okay, excellent. Here's what we're going to do. This is, I'm glad you guys are all agreeing to do this live. We're going to actually keep talking through the 8 o'clock hour. And then the conversation about climate, period, and environment is going to be on Up to Speed. It's this afternoon. Why not? It's Earth Day. It's important, and you're quite right that slamming it into a minute's not enough. Thank you, guys. Stay here. Don't go, but thank you. Dorothy Dobie, former Conservative MP for Winnipeg South, former Parliamentary Secretary Aaron Selby, former NDP MLA for Southdale and Winnipeg, Dan Vandel, up to until next week, Liberal MP for St. Boniface, St. Vital, our Made in Manitoba political partisan panel. And yeah, we bit off a bit more than we could chew this morning, but we'll get to that third topic on the environment and climate because it's important, and we'll have that on Up to Speed this afternoon. It is 2 minutes to 8. Here's Heather with headlines.
Good morning. Well, a U.S.-based organization is moving its operations to Manitoba as the uncertainty of U.S. tariffs continues. Global Vision 2020 gives eyeglasses to people in developing countries. Their lenses, though, and the frames come from China, and the U.S. recently slapped a 145% tariff on Chinese imports. Experts say bail reform is not the way to fix a revolving door of reoffenders in the justice system. Adelina Iftene is an associate professor of law at Dalhousie University. She says most offenders are eventually released, and if they don't get the support they need, there's a good chance they'll reoffend. She says that is why improving those supports is a better way to try to reduce crime. I'll be back with more at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather. The news is next. World Report.
on Power.
Blink-182 are one of the biggest rock or punk bands of the last few decades. But behind the scenes, it's been a lot. Breakups, cancer diagnoses, plane crashes. Mark Hoppus from Blink-182 will be here to tell you about his new memoir and why they've kept going. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
I'm in Halifax today. It's the final stop in our cross-country election road trip. We'll take a look at housing, fisheries, and get a pulse on what people on the East Coast are talking about. That's coming up. 2 special editions of The Current from Halifax.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Cardinals from around the world are arriving at the Vatican, and reporters are tracking them looking for information. The coming days and weeks will be a flurry of activity. The Catholic Church is preparing to lay its former leader to rest. Then it begins an ancient process of convening a conclave to select the next pope. For more, I'm joined by Megan Williams in the Vatican. Megan, there are new details about next steps in the Pope's funeral. What have we learned?
Well, we've learned when the funeral is going to be, which is Saturday morning at 10 o'clock Rome time. It will be presided over Cardinal Giambattista Re. Right now, the cardinals are meeting to discuss other details, probably figure out when the conclave is going to be. That hasn't been announced. But starting the day of the funeral on Saturday, that is a period of 9 days of mourning. So the conclave won't be before then. On Wednesday, the Vatican has said they will bring the Pope's body in the coffin. They've released pictures of that now to St. Peter's Basilica. Right now, the Pope's body is in his Santa Marta guest house. So on Wednesday, people will start lining up to be able to view the Pope in his coffin inside St. Peter's Basilica.
You are at the Vatican again today. What's the mood like there?
There's lots and lots of people streaming down the main avenue towards the St. Peter's Square, St. Peter's Basilica. It's very crowded here. Lots of sadness, of course. Many, many pilgrims have come from all over the world. This is the Holy Jubilee year for the Catholic Church, which happens every 25 years. So there were already a lot of people coming in, and I think a lot of disappointed people who were hoping to capture a glimpse of the Pope. But still, I think there's anticipation to the funeral. Certainly here at the Vatican, there's a lot of buzz. There's a lot to deal with in the coming days.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, Marcia.
Megan Williams reporting from the Vatican. Catholic churches around the world are holding Mass to remember Pope Francis. Hundreds of people gather in Manila for Requiem Mass. The Philippines is considered one of the world's largest Catholic strongholds. More than 80 million Catholics live there. These worshippers reflect on their memories of Pope Francis.
I cried a lot because I last saw him last Palm Sunday in St. Peter's Square. So I was fortunate enough to see him to bless us.
The holiness of Pope Francis exudes from his personality.
One of the people said to be in line to succeed Pope Francis is Filipino Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. The 67-year-old has often been referred to as the Asian Francis. Pope Francis's legacy is a complex one for many, including members of Indigenous communities. On a visit to Canada nearly 3 years ago, the Pope apologized for the harms done in residential schools. The Pope called it a genocide. As Sam Sampson tells us, many hope his successor will continue his work of reconciliation.
I think he appreciates to hear what the stories are of the people of this land.
Chief Tony Alexis of Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation stands on the edge of Lac St. Anne, exactly where Pope Francis blessed the water during his 2022 visit, part of a historic change between the Catholic Church and Indigenous communities.
that I am deeply sorry.
While in Alberta, Pope Francis made the church's first apology on Canadian soil for the abuse Indigenous people suffered in Catholic-run residential schools.
He didn't come here to stand above us. He came to stand with us.
Later, Pope Francis declared what happened in residential schools was a genocide, and he rejected the doctrine of discovery, a religious document that gives Christian explorers claim to land.
No apology will be able to rectify the harms that were felt by residential school survivors.
Anishinaabe author and University of Manitoba professor Nigon Sinclair says the Catholic Church needs to build on this momentum and do more, like release residential school records.
My hope is that the Catholic Church picks up the work of the progressive Pope and doesn't forget that what brought you to this point of finally Indigenous peoples are beginning to rebuild trust with you.
A call to action for whoever takes Pope Francis's place. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Lac St. Anne, Alberta.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is promising to release his party's fully costed platform today. And in the final days of the Canadian election campaign, he is making a push to win over seniors. They are a powerful voting bloc, one that has traditionally supported the Conservative Party. But as Kate McKenna reports, public opinion polls show many are looking to the Liberals.
I haven't decided yet. That might surprise you, but I have not decided.
Gail Brown says her vote is still up for grabs. The Toronto senior says she's been paying close attention to the campaign. Yesterday, she heard Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre speak to the Canadian Association of Retired Persons.
Well, he's made quite a few mistakes, and one of them is constantly shooting down the other party and saying the same things over and over again. He should have instead push the positive side of his campaign.
In the final days of the race, Poilievre is making his pitch to seniors. He released a new ad targeting baby boomers, and yesterday in Toronto, he spoke to CARP members in a town hall.
Conservatives will preserve the age of retirement for CPP, OAS, and GIS at age 65, period.
Polls show his rival, Liberal leader Mark Carney, is leading in senior support. Rudy Boudinol is the president of CARP.
Seniors are very fearful right now. They're really worried about their retirement. They're worried about their income. I guess they're going to things that feel comfortable or safer.
Seniors represent a powerful voting bloc, in part because they're a demographic that reliably shows up to vote. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Mississauga, Ontario.
Liberal leader Mark Carney had some star power on stage with him last night at his rally in Fredericton.
Well, I'm getting old, but I'm not old yet. I'm already worried that I might fall.
That is musician David Miles, now running as the Liberal candidate in Fredericton Oromocto. And he got the crowd warmed up before Carney delivered his speech, which featured a new take on an old line.
The core of our plan is to build. Baby, build. We will be done.
Carney is pitching himself as a leader who can stand up to U.S. President Donald Trump. And today he'll do that in Quebec. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is starting his day in the Vancouver area with similar talking points.
This is the most consequential election in a generation because Trump is attacking Canadian jobs. He's coming for our land, our water, our health care. He's trying to hike up drug prices, all for the benefit of billionaires.
He will also hold a rally in Edmonton tonight. Some communities across the country are seeing impacts of Ottawa's cap on international students. A college on Prince Edward Island says it is cutting programs to save money. And as Sheehan Desjardins tells us, that's having a trickle-down effect on tourism, one of the island's biggest industries.
Are we busy tonight?
A popular hotel in the heart of Charlottetown is gearing up for the tourism season rush, the check-in counter being run largely by Holland College grads.
Every year we hire between 8 to 12 students.
Not for long, though. The program's being suspended. Ricardo Salvini is VP of Operations at the Rod Hotel.
Devastating is the word, and we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do.
The island's biggest community college says federal policy changes for international students will cost them millions. Their enrollment anticipated to drop 83%. Cuts had to be made, 8 programs are going. Now the Tourism Industry Association is bracing for the consequences.
We rely so heavily on those programs. I just don't think anybody really understood the domino effect that could have.
Corinne Clemens is the CEO.
I think we were all a little bit surprised and trying to work with the college to get some training programs back.
Frances Gertz with Stewart Travel Group sent the college a letter, hoping it reconsiders.
Investing in tourism in Prince Edward Island is critical, and I think it's something we really need to figure out how to support.
Holland College says current students will graduate. It's not accepting more for now. The industry hopes to hire that final wave, but knows it won't be enough to handle the flood of tourists down the road. Chien Desjardins, CBC News, Charlottetown.
There is more on this story at cbcnews.ca. Go to the local tab and scroll down to the PEI page. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're expecting a rainy Tuesday morning after the long weekend here. I should say Tuesday afternoon and evening. Thanks for joining us here, live from Winnipeg. We'll get into those forecast details in a moment. There's snow expected in parts of west central Manitoba today as well. You are on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and on YouTube. Well, this half hour on the program, we are going to be talking more about the reaction to the death of Pope Francis. Catholics around the world, as you've been hearing over the last 24 hours, have been mourning and reflecting on his death. He's been leader of the Catholic Church for the past 12 years. The question we're going to ask this half hour is, what direction will the church go in now? What direction will the next pope take the Catholic Church in now? Will it be more progressive policy, or will it be a return to more conservative policy for the church? We'll have this conversation with the Archbishop of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Winnipeg. Stay tuned. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells for more headlines.
Good morning. Well, a member of Winnipeg's Jewish community says hate has no place regardless of politics. Campaign signs from incumbent Conservative MP Marty Morantz were vandalized in his riding over the long weekend. Some had graffiti that made Morantz look like Adolf Hitler. Avram Sharak says that is not the way to voice political disagreements. Winnipeg West Liberal candidate Doug Ailefson also weighing in, saying anti-Semitism has no place in Canada regardless of political disagreements. Well, downtown Winnipeg was so loud last night. Thousands at the sold-out Whiteout Street Party outside Canada Life Centre, and inside, the Jets beat the Blues, taking a 2-0 lead in the playoff series. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
So you obviously watch hockey year-round. I'm the playoff bandwagon person. What are you seeing in the Jets in the playoffs, Heather, that you're loving? Because the games have been awesome, but they have been tight and close. So
yes, you know what? It's almost like they turned it up a little bit. They're so fast, and they're like they just don't stop. It's incredible. It's different than the regular season. I mean, they really are turned on.
Yeah, I agree. I from where I sat, I also thought Game 2 had, much better defense on the Jets' part than Game 1. And they never slowed. In the Game 1, there were periods where they would slow down. Last night was just like full on from start to end, I thought.
It really was. And you know what? Talk about defense. Their offense, they get past the other team's defense. You know, they're finding ways in. It's great.
Did you expect this series to be this close so far, though? Because even though the Jets have won the first two, let's look at the scores, right? 2-1 and effectively 3-2, even though they're those empty netters at the other game.
Yeah, but you know what? I did expect it because the Blues are a really good team.
Yeah, they've been hot coming out the back end of the season, too. Yeah. All right, well, we'll see what happens when they're on the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fun times. I love the spirit downtown in Winnipeg with everyone packed in their whiteout gear. It brings a nice vibrancy to the city. It doesn't hurt that they won as well. All right, let's get into the traffic situation. Corey Funk has popped in. You've been watching highways, hey?
Yes. Keep an eye on Manitoba 511 right now. Throughout the morning, I've been watching conditions slowly deteriorate around Roblin and Russell on those highways there as that kind of system moves in. Nothing wild, but I was looking at some of the cameras there, and there is some snow on the highway, so it could be a little bit slippery, so just heads up there. Other than that, though, there is also a stall here in Winnipeg, Broadway and Donald, so the eastbound middle lane on Broadway is blocked by a stalled semi, so keep an eye out for that. If you see anything else going on out there, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3000. 1093.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
And now Abby's got a few more details in our forecast.
It's going to be gray and soggy across the province. We're looking at clouds and showers, and that snowfall warning still remains in place for Dauphin, Russell, surrounding areas. It's going to be stretching mostly into western Manitoba, and as the snow pushes further east, communities in some parts of southern Manitoba will see a transition from rain to wet snow. Winnipeg at this point, 7 degrees, still cloudy outside. It's going to be more like a gray one, and then we'll see that rain come around the noon period. Temperatures warming up to 13 degrees today.
Time right now is 8:15 on 89.3 FM. And as I mentioned, around the world, Catholics continue to mourn the passing of Pope Francis. The Vatican confirmed he died Easter Monday. He was 88 years old. And it came after he just spoke to crowds on Easter Sunday. He had been battling pneumonia and a respiratory infection. Francis has been leading the church since 2013. He was seen as a progressive leader of the Roman Catholic Church, far less concerned about enforcing church doctrine than his predecessors. I spoke yesterday with a number of different Manitobans for their perspective on this, and one of them is Ana Lu, who's a Winnipeg singer who is from Buenos Aires, Argentina. So that is where Pope Francis was also from. And she knew him and attended services when he was a cardinal, so she spoke about what he was like as a person. But she also raised some concerns about where the church might go next.
I'm just so scared about who's going to succeed. I'm not a Catholic anymore, but I think he was a good leader for the church. He did. I'm sure he was very restricted in what he could do, and of course he wasn't perfect. But yeah, we need someone. Like the church has such power in the world. I hope someone will come who will be more interested in uniting people and uniting people and just underlying a message of love and compassion and unity.
Ana Lu reflecting on the death of Pope Francis and raising concerns, as we mentioned, about where the church might go next. Joining us to talk about Pope Francis's death and the future is the Archbishop of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Winnipeg, Murray Chatelain. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
First, while we have you live, what are your thoughts on the legacy of Pope Francis?
Well, we're kind of grieving the loss of our good grandpa. It feels like that, we've lost our shepherd. I just am a marvel, that at 75 years old, he accepted that responsibility of leading our church. And who in their life sort of peaks from 75 to 88, an amazing thing. So just very grateful for his legacy, for all that he has offered.
You had shared that you actually had the privilege to meet the Pope on 2 occasions. What was he like? Were they brief meetings, or did you spend some significant time with him?
They were, one was more of a liturgical element, so it was fairly brief, but the other one was a couple hours, along with about 20 bishops of us from Western Canada. And I found him very gracious, and that he was eager to hear what we had to say. He wanted to hear how things were going in our area. So I appreciated that spirit of listening and openness, and I think that reflected his call to all of our church for leadership.
You've heard the concerns about the church. Some have concerns that the church will veer more conservative, given the geopolitical situation of our time. There are others who maybe believe that the church should veer more conservative. What are your thoughts on the future direction and what might be needed in this moment?
I guess first I want to celebrate the directions that Pope Francis has led us and just remind us, the environment, just the sense of caring for Mother Earth, our common home. That's just so important that he really spoke strongly of that 13, 12 years ago, that I think really helped to bring to the fore the importance of our environment. And so that really encourages the respect and to make decisions that are long-term, far-seeing, that we look for that. his concern around migration. We have so many displaced people in the world today. And, that he really helped us to look at overflowing refugee camps, trafficking issues, exploitation of the vulnerable. I think he's really challenging us always to welcome the stranger and to accompany people who are new to our country. And then the Indigenous issues. So I was the bishop up in the northern Manitoba, Saskatchewan. Some of our parishioners were the ones that met with him a few years ago in April. And already 3 months later, he was back visiting in Canada to offer a heartfelt apology. And that really was a significant and important for all of our church, his leadership there. So just that we really celebrate and remember some of these gifts that he's offered. And so we really pray that that will continue. And I really have hopes that the love, unity, a prayerfulness, a listening, that those qualities continue for sure.
What about in the discussions to choose a new pope and as the ballots are cast, should those come forward and say that the church should return to a more conservative stance? Do you have a sense of whether or not what you're talking about will continue? Because that may be your prayer this morning, Archbishop, but there may be others that are going to want to push the church back in a different direction. What's your case for not having it move in that different direction?
I think the Gospels and the teachings of our church are not meant to move towards a harshness. So I have trust and we pray. I just have confidence that millions of people every day pray for the Pope, and now we're praying for the discernment around the new Pope. I think many people have seen the movie Conclave, and that's sort of in their minds, but that the Holy Spirit, that's our foundation, and that it's Jesus's church, not ours. So we really have confidence and pray that we are blessed with yet another good Pope.
Do you know at all, or are you already, I don't know how this works, so forgive my ignorance here, but are you ready to having conversations with your peers and counterparts about who might be in the running for the next Pope?
There's always some speculation, that we have the hopes in that. I think one of the things is God is a God of surprises. And so I am thinking that, we might be quite surprised by who comes forth. They could be from Africa. They could be from India. And so those would be some of the speculations that I would hear among other bishops and that it's possible for some surprise. But regardless, we pray that we are blessed with a leader that is going to be really according to our first leader, Jesus.
What are the next steps for the Vatican to bring in a new pope? For those that don't know the process, or as you alluded to the movie, so I'll allude to the movie, who haven't watched Conclave.
No, I haven't watched it. Eventually I will, but the first is grieving and celebrating Pope Francis. So I think first we focus on, thanking God and Francis for his generous yes to God. So first we want to have that. Then all the cardinals of the world that are able will gather, and then they will be the voting and discernment of who will be the next Pope.
May I ask you about an issue that Pope Francis wasn't progressive on? We talked to a Manitoban yesterday who'd left the Catholic faith for 10 years and then returned to it. She actually said her children returned to the faith as well because they liked Pope Francis and they liked how he spoke truth to power and was true to some of the things you're talking about this morning. He's been called the People's Pope. But she did say that he didn't expand the role of women within the church. Is that a direction that you think the church might take under a new leader?
I think that that is an important issue. I come from the north where the kokums, the grandmothers and the matriarchs of the families are so essential. And they were the main leaders in our Catholic parishes in the north. So I know that the women's roles is very important. We pray that there'll be continued progress on that. And I think there is, Pope Francis did make some movement, and we just pray that will continue.
Thank you very much for being with us on this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Marcy.
Live with us on CBC, that's the Archbishop of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Winnipeg, Murray Chatelain. It is 8:24, and details are now coming out about the Pope and the funeral, which will be coming up this weekend.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
7 degrees, mostly cloudy in the city of Winnipeg, and the following airtime is made available for messages provided by registered political parties as required by the Canada Elections Act.
A lot of us really don't want Pierre Poilievre to win this election. But the more I hear about Mark Carney, the more I worry. He's planning tax cuts for the rich and health care cuts for the rest of us. Here's the thing. We know we can count on the NDP. They've always fought for us, and we need them in Ottawa more than ever. Canada works best when the NDP's there. We just gotta vote for them. Authorized by the registered agent for the New Democratic Party of Canada.
The proceeding was a paid political ad. It's 8:25 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on that app and YouTube. Well, it is Earth Day, and local band Baltimore Road has a great Earth Day song. It was dedicated to the memory of the scientist and activist Rachel Carson. The tune's called Look Around.
Our world is fading. Hear the message she is sending. No time for waiting for the day of hypocrisy's ending. Look around and you will see. Look around. Sky is crying, bitter tears silently falling. Oceans are dying. Mother of life, can you hear her calling? Look around and try to see the way it used to be. Look around. Look around. See the ground. Look around. As the world comes falling down, as the world comes falling down. That's not the way it has to be. Has anyone plainly seen? Hear the voices when they say there's got to be a way. Why are we still sleeping through the nightmare? play their games while cheating. On the field of unnatural disasters, look around and try to see this future does not have to be. Look around. Look around. See the ground. Look around.
Local band Baltimore Road. This is their Earth Day song dedicated to the memory of the scientist and activist Rachel Carson. It is Earth Day, and we're going to have a mixed bag weather-wise. 7 degrees in the city of Winnipeg, mostly cloudy with rain starting near noon. It's now lightly raining over in Brandon, and it's mostly sunny in Thompson and -7 right now, although we do have a snowfall warning for west central Manitoba, 10 to 20 centimeters, including Dauphin right through Swan Valley and Duck Mountain Provincial Park. Well, I want to do some thank yous for those who worked on items in the program today, including our news department, Heather Wells, Joni Nicolo, and Megan Ketcherson out there. In addition, the associate producers who worked on items that you heard on Information Radio this morning, Sid Horshig and Issa Kickson, producer Donna Carrero of our election material, our live crew, Brad Lillies, Corey Funk and Abby Adeyemi, and our producer of the Current Affairs programs is Nellie Gonzalez, and the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba is Leif Larson. Thank you, everybody, for your work. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells. Winnipeg police are investigating graffiti on election signs in Tuxedo. Over the weekend, campaign signs of a local Jewish candidate in the federal election were defaced with hateful messages. Some of the signs of incumbent Winnipeg West MP, Conservative Marty Morantz, were defaced to make him look like Adolf Hitler. Member of the city's Jewish community, Avram Sharak, says one of the defaced signs was near the Asper Community Campus.
They very much targeted a spot where they knew the maximum number of Jewish people would go by, which is disturbing, quite frankly. It's just disturbing because what's tomorrow going to bring? Are they going to do it again?
Winnipeg West Liberal candidate Doug Ailefson issued a statement supporting Morantz. He says anti-Semitism has no place in Canada, regardless of political disagreements. The former head of the Assembly of First Nations says Pope Francis had a deep relationship with Indigenous people. Phil Fontaine pushed for decades to get the Catholic Church to apologize for its role in Canada's residential schools. Francis delivered that apology in 2022 when he visited Canada. Fontaine says Francis did what other Catholic leaders would not.
Pope Francis was a compassionate person. He was humble, and his humility took him to a place where his predecessors were unable to go. We now have an opportunity to work on reconciliation together.
Pope Francis died yesterday at the age of 88 from stroke and heart failure. Some Winnipeggers worry about who the Catholic Church will choose to replace him. During his time as Pope, Francis apologized to Indigenous people, as we heard, and also welcomed the LGBTQ+ community. University of Manitoba Indigenous Studies professor Negon Sinclair says Francis was a progressive leader whose work will not be forgotten.
I have a deep, deep fear that the Catholic Church is going to respond with a very conservative, very traditionalist, someone who's trying to be regressive, someone who's trying to turn back the clock.
Sinclair believes the situation draws comparisons to U.S. politics, where two progressive presidents have been followed by a regressive president, he says, who is trying to turn back the clock. An American nonprofit is moving its warehouse to Manitoba because of challenges caused by U.S. tariffs. Global Vision 2020 provides eyeglasses to people in developing countries. Their raw materials, things like lenses and frames, come from China. And the U.S. has slapped a 145% tariff on Chinese imports. That means costs and prices for their glasses would almost double. Greg Wiens is the organization's director of operations. He says the price increase would lead to fewer people around the world getting proper eyeglasses.
I'm thinking the most about my team that I partnered up with in Congo. They can't swallow that type of sudden increase. So going through Canada, will keep that price the same prices that they're used to.
The nonprofit will move production to Manitoba this summer. Plenty of white noise in downtown Winnipeg last night. Thousands at the sold-out Whiteout Street Party outside Canada Life Centre. Inside, the Jets beat the Blues, taking a 2-0 lead in that playoff series. Fan Lana Thiessen has a prediction.
I definitely see a Jets sweep, but I don't want to jinx it, so knock on wood. But I'll be here in the building on Sunday, so I'm hoping for a Jets sweep, but I definitely see a Jets win.
And Coach Scott Arniel is hoping for a Jets win as well. He says his team turned it up and took advantage of key moments last night.
That's what playoff hockey is. One team's going to make a mistake. You want to put as much pressure and do the things that you do well and force those teams to make that mistake.
Now the Jets head into Blues territory for Game 3. Game time in St. Louis is 8:30 Thursday night. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, last look at what's going on with our morning commute with Corey Funk.
Yes, right now there is a stalled semi-eastbound Broadway in the middle lane at Donald, so that might be causing some backups there as well. If you're in western Manitoba this morning, snowy highway conditions, particularly around Russell and Roblin. Still drivable, but just not ideal.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
And Abby, take it away with the last weather.
It's going to be grey and soggy Tuesday across the province. Everything from rain to heavy snow, depending on where you are. We're going to see in the Red River Valley region, we're looking at rain, winds, and some transition to wet snow in the Brandon region as that system moves through. And in the west central region, we're looking at snowfall warning still in effect for Dauphin and surrounding areas. We're looking at about 10 to 20 centimeters of snowfall in that region. And for the southern region, with that rain coming our way after midday, we're talking about 5 to 10 millimeters of rain across board.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to another edition of CBC's Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care, be well, Manitoba, and stay with CBC because The Current is coming up next. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.